and we are loved. For we are one. We are, and we are light. We are. You love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. And all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, 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 I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Well, here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, and all of the love we feel will save us anyway. Will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, will never be the same ever again.
Hello and welcome to another SDAQ&A. My special guest today is Rodrigo Custódio. How are you, Rodrigo?
Hey, Peter. Doing well, doing well. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, man.
Mate, great to have you on the show. I love how this panned out. Yesterday's show, because I'd had some adjustments with today. You're watching live, to the Brian Neumann show. Great
Yeah,
book, by
great
the
show.
way. For those watching, go and buy his book. It's available on Amazon, and it's a really, really good read. And I just said, "Hey, Rodrigo, can you do tomorrow's show?" You wrote back, "Yep." I sent the link this morning. Within 30 seconds, we're there. Man, I wish every show ran that easy to put together. Hey, we're going to learn a little bit about you, your story, your journey, your incredible Facebook group, which is I'm just going to quickly share it to the screen. And we met for the first time in February. So I'm just trying to find the screen. There it is. We met for the first time in February, but you'd mentioned to me that you'd been watching SDAQ&A since 2021, before
Yeah,
you actually had left the Adventist church. So we'll talk a bit about that as well. I often have trouble pronouncing this, so help me. Paraki Posamos.
perfect.
Oh,
Perfect.
wow.
Perfect. Brazilian pronunciation.
I'm learning. And as I said, you've got 233,000 followers.
Yeah,
That's incredible. And yeah, so that's an incredible work and a story there that I think you were sharing with me in when I was in Loma Linda in February at the former Adventist Fellowship,
yeah.
which was also amazing. Thanks to James Andres for funding that trip and driving me around and just giving me such an incredible experience over there. But you were mentioning that that particular Facebook group had started out as something quite different
Yes.
and had morphed into this whole new thing. So we'll talk about that as well. I just wanted to, just before, on a sad note, to before we kind of get in and look into this topic, seeking the true gospel. Sadly, this past week, I'm just going to share it on the screen. Dr. Don Roy passed away. He was a much loved member of this group. I've interviewed him, I think, 2 times. I have my list here of people that I am working through to interview, and he was third down my list to come on the show in a week or two. And so, yeah, it's very, very sad that we say goodbye to Dr. Don Roy, local Australian guy, had I think 3 PhDs. He got his third one when he was 82, 83,
Wow.
and which was just this last year or so. And so I just wanted to give him a quick thank you and nod and tribute to Dr. Don Roy. He and I, in many ways, disagreed on some things, but we were firm friends. His son was on the show recently, so, condolences to the whole family there. And I'd like to do a whole tribute show down the track as well. Now, just checking who's watching today. Oh, good. We've got a lot of people. George Tishi. Now, this is what George has said, Rodrigo. Como vai, Peter? Desejo sucesso no show de hoje.
Perfect. Hey, but you
He,
speak Portuguese.
he, he is saying, I hope you have a great and a successful show. Is that right?
Yes, 100% correct.
Whoa, incredible. See, George, it's your influence. And we've got here Avis Johnson, all watching from Henderson, 111 degrees. Whoa, Fahrenheit. That's pretty hot. And John Kaler. Now, John, the guy that runs the president of Brazil Adventist Church, Ayrton Kohler, not Kaler, isn't it? That doesn't have the E in there, so there's no relative there. I'm imagining. And we've got Barry watching, Parade Orange, California Girl, Angela Lima. So we're a nice, healthy audience today. Viva Nova Alianza.
Alianza. Yep.
Can you read that for me?
Yeah, she's saying good night, and we're sending cheers from Brazil.
And this
Oh,
one.
she's my wife, Denise.
Ah, she's probably in the other room there, is she?
Yep.
Hey, Denise. Well, come in and say hi if you want. So, look, welcome everybody, and those watching on Facebook. Just keep in mind, if you are watching on Facebook, we've got Deanna Edens, Kelly Burns saying hello, Glenda Harker, Tony and Raywin Morgan are watching, and many others. If you are watching on the Facebook group and you want to comment and have your comments brought onto the screen, just go over to our Facebook page, SDAQ&A Facebook page, and I can then bring it onto the screen. Okay, so I've called today Seeking the True Gospel. And as I've said, my very special guest is Rodrigo Custódio, and he has his social media presence there with Paraki Possamos. And I've subtitled our talk today, Leaving Adventism and Finding the Gospel. Now, that's often a little bit controversial because it implies that, can you find the gospel within Adventism? Of course you can. I think we're going to uncover perhaps that through Adventism, it might be a kind of a bit of a long route or route
A roller
to
coaster.
find. It's a roller coaster. It's a forest. Yeah, there's thorns and cranberries all along the way. So so tell us a little bit about who you are, how you've stumbled across our show, and when you get to the point where you leave the church, let's pause there, and I want to drill down a little bit more deeply on that. So bring us up to 2022 when you left the church. Who is
Sure.
Rodrigo? Tell us your background, and
Sure.
go for it.
Thank you, Peter. Well, first of all, thank you for all the invitations. And in California, Loma Linda was a great time with so many other friends as well. And that was a great time to actually meet you after a couple of years watching your show and learning a lot about Adventist history, and primarily talking about Australia as well, because it's so far from my original country, and the connection with the Adventism is so big in Australia. So that was a good. Your channel really helps a lot of people in Brazil. Unfortunately, not everybody in Brazil speaks English or understands. But now the technology, now YouTube can put the captions. There's something
Right.
that can people use to reach the content. So that really helps.
Right. So you can caption now and have it translate in real time as well.
In real time. Yeah.
Wow.
That's great. So I have been watching your channel and other channels as well, including Gene Baber, Academia Apologia, and other channels as well. Test the Prophet for sure, and so many other channels. And before 2022, I'm born and raised Seventh-day Adventist. My parents, both mom and my father and my mom, from 4 generations of Seventh-day Adventists. Uh, I left the church after 40 years. I never left the church. I always studied in Seventh-day Adventist schools, colleges, preparatory schools since the beginning, my entire life. I know the system, and I serve the church as contractor for marketing and strategies. I work with pastors as well in different conferences in Brazil and here in the US. So the whole point of, technically speaking, my work was support pastors and help pastors to bring more people in and make the service a little bit more dynamic, so people can enjoy the service, stay in the service, and at least grab something after 6 days of disconnection completely. So that was the main, let's say, my main help with pastors in the church. I was never an employee of the church. I was a contractor, but my phone always rang when was ringing always when pastors need help.
Yeah.
My numbers are going down, my communication is not working, something like that. So that was the main thing. And in one of these churches, I received the invitation to support a AWR conference of Revelation. And as a Seventh-day Adventist, pretty much most of them, we just read the Sabbath school. We just go to the church and listen to the sermon and let's go back home or serve in some capacity, right? And for the first time in this AWR series of Revelation, I decided to support, professionally speaking, with the marketing, advertising, radio spots, YouTube ads, etc. And then the pastor called me and say, "Hey, we're going to do some marketing. You have some budget for that. However, I have three rules to request for you. The rule number one: never mention we are Seventh-day Adventists. This is the rule number one. The rule number two: never mention Ellen White. Always say we always going to use the Bible and the Bible alone. And for the address, just put meeting hall. Just don't point to Google Meets or Google Maps or anything else. Just say it's a meeting hall. This is the address. Come visit us over the next 10 days."
Classic.
And that is completely different. In Brazil, we don't have that. I was surprised by the request. And when I heard the pastor asking me that, I something popped in my mind saying, why? Just the three letters, why? And in Brazil, just for you to give you a perspective, Peter, in Brazil, Seventh-day Adventists and evangelicals, they walk side by side. The Seventh-day Adventist Church has all the doors open for into the evangelical community. They are not considered as a cult. They are treated as evangelicals in Brazil since, let's say, 90s, 92. The evangelical opened the door to the Seventh-day Adventists, and that facilitates the Adventism to get inside of the social fabric or the evangelical fabric in Brazil. So that's why they don't have to hide. They don't have to present themselves in a different way, like here in the US, for example. They don't have to worry about what people are thinking about them or doctrines or etc. because they are considered evangelicals, legit evangelicals since the beginning.
Wow. Do you trace that back prior to the 90s as well, or was this a kind of a concerted effort and an intentional thing to just present as being side by side, or does it go way back? Because surely the evangelical movement would have looked a little bit with suspicion upon Adventism at some point.
Yeah, if you look back to the history in Brazil, we had a military regime in Brazil for a long time, and that creates a different layer of extreme fundamentalism in Brazil for the Adventists during the military period. So we're talking about the Adventist church preaching the law saves, and the law helps you to get into heaven until 1989, 1990. When Brazil recovered democracy, the Adventist church changed the way they preach the gospel because now democracy was changing the social fabric. And we have a very important preacher, Alejandro Bullion. Maybe you know about him. And this guy was changing the whole scenario in Adventism, preaching the grace in Jesus alone. And that changed the whole scenario in Brazil. That's why from the 90s, Brazilian Adventists, they start being seen as evangelicals because they were preaching the grace, but they were not actually changing doctrines, but preaching out the grace as evangelicals.
Right. So you're saying it's a little bit like what happened when Questions on Doctrine was released in 1957. There was an aim there that went out through to into the 60s that Adventists were an evangelical church. And so it was like kind of dressing it up a little bit more as evangelical. And so they began to be received as
Correct.
that. But underneath, really
Yes.
not much had changed. In the 60s, there was a huge pushback to the church leaders saying, hey, we're evangelical, nothing to see here. The only difference is we go to church on Sabbath. Trinity is the same. Everything else is the same. Few
Hmm.
quirky differences. But the pushback was from the original Adventists. The traditional Adventist was like, no, this is
Yeah.
not us. And as you've watched my show, I often say that formed a split in the church.
Yeah.
In Brazil, when that happened, did the members underneath who know, hang on, we are more traditional, our doctrines are quite distinct. Did they not push back so much and just kind of realized it was a good tactic because it gave them a chance to proselytize more?
No, actually, they really hate it. I'm talking about the old generation, the
Yeah.
old folks. The guys who, let's say, the guys who stand for the church until the 90s, the beginning of the 90s, they were preaching the law. When Alejandro Bullion put himself in front of thousands of people inside of huge gymnasiums, huge stadiums, presenting the grace, they didn't like, and they expelled Alejandro Bullion from most of the pulpits.
Right. Okay.
But
Okay.
then they start seeing like we start losing people or losing the reach because we are not preaching the grace in a new democracy. People are now willing to put in what they're thinking out, their opinions out. They just changing churches, for example, and they were not used to that.
Right. 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 So
And
what was
then,
his name again? And was he a bit of the Des Ford of the Brazilian kind of faction church?
yeah, he's Alejandro Bullion. I believe he's a if it's Bolivian or Peruvian, Bolivian or Peruvian, one of those.
Right. Just trying to look him up online. How do you spell his name?
Alejandro is Alejandro. Alejandro Alaja.
Right. He's still alive and active, or has he kind of left the church, or what's happened to him?
He lives, and then he still have a ministry, mostly online, mostly on YouTube. He's still preaching, but he was the guy. Actually, this is funny because I just made a documentary talking about Adventist pastors, and Ayrton Killer, now the secretary of the General Conference,
Yes.
replaced him with a new evangelist for the South America.
Right.
So he pretty much fired Alejandro Bullion, the grace guy, and replaced it with a guy who is a most apocalyptic, revelation
Right.
based, prophetic guy. 100 beasts, 100 heads, 100 lions flying. This type of guy. He
Yeah.
replaced Alejandro Bullion.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a very similar parallel to what was going on here and in the States, not so much in Europe, where a more evangelical style Adventism, what I call gospel Adventism, the gospelers all rose up and tried to get back to the Bible, put Ellen White in the back seat a bit more, and the reaction was strong. And would you say that that I'm just going to bring him up onto the screen to check we've got the right person. Is this the guy we're
Correct.
talking? Yeah, right.
Correct.
So he was coming along with a righteousness by faith kind of message, and perhaps along comes this guy. Let's see, where is it? I'm just trying to Ayrton Kohler. Is that how we say his name?
Yeah, usually they say Ayrton Killer,
Killer. Right.
but they try to avoid the.
Right. Is that him there?
Yes, this is the secretary of the GC today.
Now,
And
so he's no longer the president of the division in Brazil.
no,
Now, just reading this is pretty incredible. So he's kind of come along and trying to put the church straight in Brazil, like Ted Wilson's trying to do around the world
correct.
initially. But this is amazing. I only just read about him today, even though George and I have had some discussions about him. I think he's being groomed to be the next Ted Wilson, but I didn't realize how high up he already is. He's one of the 3 executive officers of the church, the other
Correct.
2 being the president and the treasurer. So the
Correct.
power he wields right now is incredible. He also serves on as an advisor to the Office of Advent Mission, the Office of Archives, Statistics and Research, and the Institute of World Mission.
Hmm.
3 incredible components of the Adventist Church. I mean,
Correct.
if you're there with an influence over the Office of Archive Statistics and Research, you can start controlling what information gets out and what doesn't.
Yeah, yeah, exactly like that.
Yeah,
That is the. I can tell you something. If
yeah.
he replaces Ted Wilson, I believe most of people will miss Ted Wilson.
Wow. So he is even more hardline with a desire to return the church to its roots
Exactly.
than even Ted Wilson.
Yeah.
And do you know what? When I've looked around a lot of the Ted Wilson supporters and followers, they do say he's not going hard enough. A lot of them criticize Ted, and I think, really? Isn't he doing what you guys really want? And I think they would say yes, but not as strictly as he should.
Yeah.
So, and I heard also, you might be able to share some light on this, that recently there was quite a big financial kind of fiasco going on there in Brazil, but he had already, Ayrton had already left as president then. Do you know
Yes.
much about what happened? So, because I thought, oh, that's going to affect his presidency run, but it won't, because he's not even the president of the division in Brazil anymore. What
I
was
believe
that?
I
Uh,
believe it will affect
oh, okay.
his bid for the chair.
Okay.
This
Why?
is this is how it works. Like Ayrton Killer, he stayed in Brazil for a long time as president of the whole entire South America, not only
Okay.
Brazil but the entire South America.
That's amazing.
And if you take in perspective, South America is Brazil, because we were talking about all the other countries like Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay, Chile. All these countries, they do have a presence of this SD organization, but compare it to Brazil, is like neighborhoods.
Right.
So they do not even need a new president or a new conference. They just put everything together. And
Right.
during
Right.
Ayrton Keller's term, what the idea was, hey, we need insurance. We need insurance for schools. We need insurance for churches. We need insurance for all our organization, basically. So he helped to create a insurance copycat of the ARM from the General Conference in Brazil for the entire South America, connecting all insurance needs in one single branch, one single company. That was the idea, to centralize, because Ayrton Keller is a very centralized oriented
Yeah.
leader.
He seems very skilled as well.
He is a political, very political, you know,
Machine.
machine. Yeah, this is the best word. He's a machine to make politics move. He had troubles in Brazil because the central part of Brazil, we're talking about São Paulo, the largest city, the other great big centers, Rio de Janeiro, for example. These centers, they make a lot of money, and these centers want independency from the division. So Ayrton Keller always control everything, but São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, and the center, he lost control. But over the insurance companies, he did a very good job now, completely having a complete control of the entire insurance process. The problem in Brazil that the corruption took over,
Right.
and the names involved in this corruption with the insurance companies, they were all connected to the names Ayrton Keller elected or brought in.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So that's why he's potentially still. It's going to be affecting his bid for president of the global church.
Yeah, I see this is one problem. The second problem, I believe, is that the Pacific side of the SD organization, we're talking about California, Loma Lindas, they probably not going to like Ayrton Keller already in terms of his position, his vision, his willingness to print books and books and books, 2 billion books across the planet, great conflict, great controversy, all the other Ellen White positions, and she is the prophet, she's perfect, etc. I don't see the Pacific side of the country, which is important for the General Conference in terms of voting, will take Ayrton Color as a candidate. But the
Right.
options are very thin.
Right. So you think he may not even get in the running at all? His name may be taken off the ballot, so to speak, you think?
Uh, it's hard to guess because the Ayrton Color has a brain that is a copy of Ted Wilson, a little bit worse. So the very conservative, hard taken people in the General Conference will definitely prefer Ayrton Color than any other one.
Yeah.
That's a fact. But I don't know how many people, how many votes Ayrton Color would have today. So this is a good point.
Right. Because of this big financial fallout.
Yeah.
So do you think, like when I say we, in the USA, they had the big Davenport fiasco of the 70s, and Walter Ray, who wrote, The White Lie.
Mhm.
By the way, has The White Lie been translated into, um,
Yeah, I
would it
have
be
this one.
Portuguese or Spanish?
They
Do you know?
they call a mentira branca or
Right.
la mentira branca.
Right.
Yeah.
So he was writing another book called Pirates of Privilege that exposed not only the Davenport corruption but listed names of people. It's available online for free now, but he was going to lose, my understanding, was going to lose his sustentation if he released that book, even though he'd kind of left the church. He was still on the sustentation, like the retirement kind of fund. And so he didn't release it. But the names that were listed who had fallen, they're not necessarily doing dishonest, they'd just fallen for the Ponzi scheme,
Yeah.
included high up members of the Adventist Church from the 70s. And, a lot of them lost a lot of money, but also the church itself had put money into the Ponzi scheme. So not just leaders making bad decisions, they actually put up money themselves. Is there any indication that Erton himself had invested in these? Was it a Ponzi scheme, or are you saying some kind of insurance scam? What exactly was it? Do you know? And
The
is there
scheme,
any connection to Erton having been actually involved, or they were just his kind of employees that had been involved?
no, there's no evidence, clear evidence that he participated in the money distribution that was happening. The problem with insurance that the cake was growing too fast along the years, and everybody wants a piece. And just one example, one of the managers in Brazil that was fired, he was fired. He gave back to the church 500,000 Brazilian reais just from his pocket. So we're talking about an average today's money. We're talking about $100,000 just out of the pocket. Hey, I'm giving it back. This is my phone. You can. I'm cooperating. I'm helping you
I
guys
see.
to go through the process. So they are working, and the GC sent an investigation team to cover the whole situation and look deeper. But they are expecting a numbers above 30 million reais, something like that, in money that came out to the pocket and went to the different pockets.
Right. Wow. Um, I've had this discussion with George Tichy, who's watching today, that I thought that Mark Findlay or Findlay, whatever, would be the next guy, but apparently he's too old. And George has always said, no, it's going to be Erton. So we've got a bet on that. We're betting a milkshake that.
I will put $50 on each one. Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with George. By the way, I asked George to go to my channel for an interview. We want to do that as well. It's going to
That'd
be a
be
good talk.
fantastic. Yeah.
You as well. I would like to have
Oh,
you at the
I'd
channel.
love it. Hey, we
That
could
would be
have George translate as I'm speaking, and we could try and have some kind of
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to. I think we chatted about this when we were at the former Adventist Fellowship. I'd love to kind of
Yeah.
get you to help me translate and maybe even overdub. George could do my voice. You do your own voice. We could overdub this interview later and
Yeah.
get it out there. Because while people can read captions, there's nothing like hearing your own language, in
You're
videos.
right.
Okay, look, I want to come back to Erton a little bit more. So just let that kind of marinate a bit in the back of your mind there, because I'm interested in how he is received by the world Adventist Church, not just in Brazil. And he and Ted Wilson, and I know Neil Wilson, Ted Wilson's father, was a super good politician. I'm not even
Yes.
saying that as a criticism. They're saying these guys are skilled at streamlining the machine of or the corporations of Adventism. Um, but before we look back into that and some of the other issues, tell us a little bit about your upbringing. Did anything within the Adventist kind of doctrine scare you, or were you largely immune, or able to kind of have your parents didn't kind of place you in those scenarios where you would have nightmares about probation and the Sunday laws and the time of trouble? What did young Rodrigo face with some of these stories that circulate within Adventism based on actual doctrines?
Yeah. During my young age, let's say 13 all the way to 20s, I always served the church as a volunteer, as a musician, playing instruments, helping with the soundboard, helping with the media board, etc. So I always helped the church, I always been involved, connected with the, YA, something like that. But I never paid attention to the deepness of the doctrines. I was always just following the wave. And as you were young, you just, okay, it's nice to go to church, have your friends there. I accept Jesus in my heart, etc. I don't want to go deep in the woods. I just gonna go stay here. I hate it, to be honest. I hate it. Revelation series,
Mm,
prophecy series, all that. I hated that because in my house, to be honest, Peter, my dad always preached the gospel, always
mm,
preached Jesus. We never had my mom follow Ellen White in terms of the health things, the food stuff, the trying to, read the Bible through the lens of Ellen White because it's beautiful, it's expanded. But my house, we never had Ellen White or else all the Adventists pushing, pushing, pushing. But the investigative judgment was a very hard topic for me, but I was always covering and putting inside of the box and living there, not thinking too much. But I always had a huge afraid of dying without having a chance to ask for forgiveness for everything I did in my life.
mm.
Always had this fear. Because in my mind, because of the investigative judgment, we always saying, be attention. You have to have your book clean, like clean, clean. So you don't have your book clean, you in trouble. But if I suffer an accident, like car accident, I don't have time to ask for
Yeah, yeah,
forgiveness. No, and that was my afraid as a young guy, like saying I have to be careful because I need time to ask for forgiveness.
yeah, yeah. And that then dovetails into our topic, seeking the true gospel, and how you kind of found that assurance of salvation post that. Your generation, I think, in many ways, mine was the last generation, and I'm not a baby boomer, and I'm not a Gen X. I'm in the mid in there. Um, I always say to people, if you want to work out if you're a baby boomer, then you were a teenager in 1969 when Woodstock was on. I would have been about 7 or 8, and so you just my concept of baby boomers. I like baby boomers. I'm not saying I don't like them. They're not my generation, but the
Mhm.
next generation that came on from like 1967, 69, the Gen X, I think they're called, never really connected with them as well. So there's a small group. They call them the baby busters. But I feel like my generation were the last for back then to have this nightmare kind of, by the time we'd hit 8 and 9 years old, we were firmly scared of the time of trouble, probation closing any minute, the Sunday law coming in. This book, when I was young, called Now, and it's written by Mary Kay McLeod. She's now, I think, De Silva, and she left the church, but she was also she's written another book called Betrayed, I think, which is an incredible read, available online. She took the church to court, was about to take them to court, settled out of court because of unfair pay and whatnot. But at the time when she was a young girl, she wrote this book. There's another one, I think, called Sunlight's Daughter or Sunlight or something in America that was released as well. Puts the fear of God into this book. Incredible. They turned it into a play here at Avondale, and we young 8-9-year-olds were there watching this play that the college students put on in the chapel. All the families are going along to this thing, and it was just full on. The troops are coming. You're going to be taken away to prison. It was nightmarish stuff. And so by the time I became a teenager, a bunch of my generation stayed in the church, but most of the baby boomers left over the Des Ford thing. And so I suddenly turned up to church 1984, 1985, having prior to that quite a vibrant youth program going through the late 70s into the early 80s. Next minute, all we had was table tennis once a month on a Tuesday night at the local memorial church. It just died. The boomers had all gone. But the next generation above me were 50 plus, and there was a smattering of my generation still there. So as we moved into ministry and getting involved with the church and being sure that we wanted to stay, and we felt we were righting the wrongs of this crazy fundamentalist wave that had somehow found itself in the church. It was, how did that happen? And so we dedicated the next 20, 30 years to only talking about Jesus and worship. And and I think not just me, but that whole mindset of my generation helped your generation and folk around your age, a bit younger, a little bit older, to not have to be raised in this real dark time of trouble. Now the Lord's about to return. You're going to go to jail. There's going to be all sorts of terrible things happening. This is a long spiel that gets to a point where I'm saying that I think that era of the influence of the baby boomers and their incredible Jesus movement of the 70s and late 60s, my generation trying to focus just on Jesus again, I think that era is now starting to fade once more, and a whole young generation is coming up, very conservative, very traditional Adventist, very fundamentalist, and that can be seen in the droves of young people turning out to see Doug Batchelor when he speaks, to go along to, what is it, the AY programs, or I think the General Conference has a special youth program.
Yes.
What is it? And I'm guessing it's happening in Brazil too. Excuse me. What is it that's so appealing to young people to kind of take on this kind of traditional Adventism that has such an impact on their lives often later on when they truly get down to the nitty-gritty of it?
Peter, I can, if you may, I will bring Ayrton Keller back to this context you're presenting. Ayrton Keller had the opportunity to stay with Alejandro Bullion as the evangelist for South America. He had the opportunity. Alejandro Bullion was preaching. He was in good health all the way. Grace was being preached. However, he decided to remove the message of grace and install an evangelist with the message of the end times.
Right. Yeah.
That was a presidential decision to change the scope of the message of the church in South America. From that perspective, you see a president telling Adventists, stop the grace talking. Let's talk about the end times because Jesus is coming.
Brilliant.
We're talking about end of the 90s, beginning of the 2000s. That transition creates a rupture and a break when people were being fed with the grace, and they start being fed with revelation.
Mm,
Just for your perspective, the music in Brazil is amazing.
mm,
Brazilian music is amazing. In the
I love it.
church during the military age, before the back to the democracy period, music was just hymns, just hymnals.
Yeah,
Before, at the beginning of the end of the 80s, 88, 89, 86, the music in Brazil, because of the evangelism of Alejandro Brilhante Grace, start changing. So
yeah,
you can see the all the lyrics, the melodies. So from the 90s all the way to 2000s, even the music, Adventist music in Brazil, changed completely, presenting the grace.
interesting.
Now after that, Revelation, prophecies, Ellen White, Revelation, prophecies, Ellen White, all over since 2000s until today. So the generation you're talking now, the young generation, they they are being born in this
Yeah,
scenario, in this place in Brazil. Now you can see, like for example, all the social changes that are happening, all the new society that is pretty much flourishing around, like the freedom of speech, like all the gender equality, all the messages around the society are making these young folks saying, "No, we have to be different," and Ellen White has the answer.
yeah. Boy, I love doing these interviews because I always learn something new every day, and I love how you framed that, this focus on the end times. So you had the other guy you mentioned, Alejandro.
Alejandro Bullion, yeah.
Yeah, how he's focusing on, I would say, almost Jesus times, and then Erton comes in and let's refocus back to end times. I love that positioning because a gospel Adventist essentially is looking at Jesus times, and the traditional Adventist is looking at end times. And
Yes.
Ellen White is in both groups, but right up the front for the traditional, a bit further down the back for the gospel Adventist. And I think it's important for Adventists of all persuasions and on the spectrum to just admit that there are two kinds of Adventism. One is focused on the end times, one is focused on Jesus times. And sure, the Jesus time people, yeah, they think Jesus is coming back soon. There's all sorts of crossovers, but the
Yep.
general thrust of a righteous by faith Adventist is to look to Jesus and the gospel, and the general thrust of the traditional Adventist is to search through the lens of Ellen White to take them to these end times messages and what does it mean. And
Yep.
I found within Adventism, for me, trying to be a Jesus times gospel focused Adventist when I was an Adventist
Hmm.
was so difficult. You kept pushing, at every point the youth leader would be supportive, but behind the scenes, the committees were trying to ban you, not have you perform, not have you involved. Luckily, the grassroots were fine. But that 20 or 30 years in my small part of the world where a bunch of us tried to bring in this real focus of
Hmm.
Jesus, from 1990 or 89 right through to the 2006 era, that that was, it worked and it created a lovely environment in our particular conference, but it was pushing and pushing and pushing hard, constant pushback, constant struggle.
Yeah.
Whereas as soon as we were kind of dropped off the perch and the more conservative movement started coming back after Jan Paulson left and Ted Wilson's back in, the traditional thrust of focusing on the young people, it just grew again, and our lot were gone within minutes. um,
Hmm.
so the Adventist Church, while it has these two branches, an end times focus, say the Erton and the Ted Wilsons, and it has a gospel focus like the Des Fords, the church itself makes it much easier for the traditional Adventist to flourish, and constantly is pushing back the more gospel focused Adventist.
Yeah.
And that's got to be observed and witnessed and acknowledged as well. And did you notice that in your own lifetime as well? that it was just harder to make sort of progressive changes. Whereas if you went with the flow and just followed the conservative realm, they'd really encourage you, you know.
Okay, I can make 2 points. The point number one is this: you can differentiate Adventists just making one question. You don't need more than that. You have to ask if Jesus is coming before or after the Sunday law. When Jesus is coming. And the answer will tell you who that Adventist is. Because an Seventh-day Adventist traditional fundamentalist that Ellen White said, Jesus is waiting for the Sunday law to come to earth. For an Adventist that is a gospel-oriented, Jesus-oriented, he's going to say Jesus is coming anytime.
Yeah.
So this is the main question. If you stomach any Adventist, just as when Jesus is coming back, Jesus can come anytime. Tomorrow? Yeah, if he wants to come tomorrow, he can come tomorrow. No. Jesus is only coming after the Sunday law. That's is a definite point.
Yeah. When did you come across that question? That's a beauty. When did that come into your mind?
Talking with a lot of Adventists, defending that idea that Jesus is waiting for the Sunday law. So he's watching TV, waiting for the news. To come. So this is one point. The second point I would say, I lived so many different experiences in the Seventh-day Adventist organization. I can mention one in terms of the youth and the new generation being blocked to make changes. For example, one of the main strategies in any SDA organization, any SDA church, that has more people there from the previous previous generation, is to avoid during the board meetings when you're forming the board of the church, avoid having names of young people to be voted in positions of leadership. So if you were, let's say we're all old folks here. Now we're leading the church. We're going to vote for the next year, 2025 board and departments and leaders of our church. If we want to keep the church running as we want, don't bring the names in the ballot of young folks.
Right.
This is the rule number one.
Yeah.
If you can't avoid that at any cost, you have to have young people because your church is small. Maybe your church has no enough old folks to take care of the church. You have to vote and count votes for the elderly positions, Sabbath school positions, all the leadership for the big names, for the big folks, and just leave like the music, small pathfinders. Just leave this departments for the youth, for the young people. So that is the strategy. If you can avoid the board meeting to have young folks in, you have control of everything. You don't have to worry because they can talk, but they never going to lead.
Yeah. And when young people cotton onto this and kind of force that boundary, which there's certain political maneuverings you can do to push that boundary and become involved. When they do, and I've only heard of it happening once or twice, and they get to impact change in their conference more than just their local church if they're good at being networked, and I've seen it happen. The downside is that it never lasts. They get in there, they work so hard to bring about change, but the Adventist machine is intent on ensuring anything progressive does not survive.
Yes.
And that's why it's so hard for the gospel Adventists, like even the One Project. Sure, it's still around as an independent identity, but once it was recognized by the church, now it's not. So you might be able to force your way into some kind of official status or capacity, but the church is just geared and wired to move back, enhance the end times view, bring in the Daniel Revelation seminars, and almost crush the spirit of the young person eventually. But by then they're now 35, 40, got kids, and they just go, oh, well, too bad. I've got nappies to change, got to put food, and they just give up. So it's an incredible mechanism that the Adventist Church has to remain firm with Ellen White at the helm. It's a very, very I am not surprised in the slightest that last generation theology is flourishing, that Doug Batchelor is flourishing. Amazing Facts, all, Walter Veith, Dennis Priebe, all these guys, they flourish because the Adventist church is like a garden fertilizing all of that.
Yeah, I agree,
The
100%.
progressives are considered weeds and have to kind of hide in little dark, shadowy corners.
If I can say something, I can give you one example. I was young, just a music minister in one church in São Paulo, 3,000 members.
Wow.
Choose 4 services in one Sabbath morning.
Wow.
Just for you to have a perspective. In one of two churches separately, but in one of them, we decided as young folks to remove the 5 chairs from the pulpit and
Whoa.
remove the pulpit and open the space, a more modern looking feel type of environment. That was the service for young folks.
Yeah.
Then we removed the chairs without telling the elder of the Sabbath, of that Sabbath specifically. So everybody meets on the little corner room behind the scenes before the services start. Then the elder came and looked to the pulpit like this, like on the sideways, and where's the church? Where's the chairs? Where are the chairs? And they say, no, today we don't have chairs. It's going to be a little bit different. We have the band. We have the no. Put the chairs back right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
And then the young elder, let's say, that was supporting us. No. Let the guys, let the kids work. Let the kids make their. At the end, they fought together, and they really hurt themselves, punching each other behind the pulpit.
Wow. Literally
Because
punching or metaphorically punching?
no, literally, physically fighting because of 5 chairs of the pulpit. I was there holding the jackets of one guy, trying to separate the 2
That
bodies.
is amazing. Oh, wow. The
That
presence
was
of Jesus.
fighting for Jesus. Yeah. That was crazy. So I used to say something like, "This is the pathway for Adventism." You
Yeah.
start as in the Adventism as Adventist, then you go to the exclusivist, then you go to a fundamentalist, and the last stage is the fanaticism.
Yeah.
So Adventism, exclusivism, then you have the fundamentalism and fanaticism. These 4 steps, these 4 stages, they tell the story. And most of the people who find Jesus in the 7-day organization, they really found before becoming fundamentalists and fanatics.
Yeah.
They stop right there in the exclusivist type of age or stage. They can find that. The last 2 stages is hard. Is very hard.
Yeah. 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 And as we were saying, it's Adventism is almost like a sales funnel to get you through that spiral down to that
Yes,
almost
exactly.
fanatical viewpoint.
When I was back into the pastor from AWR who asked me to support with the marketing stuff, he asked me to stay on the PowerPoint
Mm.
and stay helping with the slides during all the nights. And for the first time, I decided to pay attention to a Revelation series and the whole plot of the great controversy.
Right, because you were there doing
I was
the screen
doing,
work. Yeah.
doing the PowerPoint and say, okay, let me read that. But I put the Bible on the side and I start reading the Bible and following, trying to catch up and say, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Historically speaking, it doesn't make sense. He added the investigative judgment in the middle of the process, connecting with 1844. The story. So
Mm.
when after 10 days, I didn't stay there for 10 days, but I attended most of the event. After the event, I was 100% sure investigative judgment and the prophecies, they are completely wrong.
Mm.
The problem was that
Wow. After
I
you'd
have
done the seminar took you out of the belief.
exactly. You said everything. Yeah, you're right.
Mm.
After the seminar, I was just, what am I going to do? Then I decided to go to eBay and buy all the oldest books you can ever imagine from the Seventh Day Adventist Church,
Mm,
all the history, because I had to start from somewhere. So let me start from the beginning. William Miller, beginning of the William Miller, and I started reading and studying for at least 1 year and a half,
mm,
deeply. After that period, I had to have a conversation with my wife and then talk about this whole situation. We both held positions in the church during the time, and we were working with more than 30 people in the church, uh, responsible for that. They're volunteers in the church, and we're doing like a very important part. I was pretty much the fourth person after all the pastors, defining the service, how the service will look like, how the flow will happen, how the experience we're going to have after the service. We wait for around 9 to 10 months to train someone in silence, not telling anyone. We train I train the person who will replace me. And then in November, we decided to leave officially, but without making any noise because we were working closer to the pastor. People were pretty much looking at us as, confidants, like people
mm.
looking at us as
Mentors. Yeah.
main roles and this
Yeah.
type. And I said, I cannot push the church down at this moment, just throwing the bomb and running. So I
Mm.
have to be responsible with this transition in some point. So this was my decision, our family decision, actually to do it.
What do you think motivated you or pushed you to a tipping point where you actually left, instead of just staying and try to work away at change in the background? I had periods of time when I could have left, but the Jan Paulson era was such a positive kind of offering of hope that I thought, no, I'll stay, and I think I can bring about change. And the people just older than me were saying, "Yes, stay. Things are changing. Things are changing."
Yeah.
But when it became apparent that they weren't changing, I did leave, and that they were never going to change. But what was your tipping point like, I kind of look upon your example as one I wish I'd followed, where when you realized this, you took steps, you took action, and you left. Why did you do that and not follow? I'm sure there was a calling from many of your friends to stay and bring about change. What gave you that courage to just jump over the line and leave?
There was a we had a public meeting in the church, a business meeting, to held all the talking about the situation of the church I was attending at the point at that moment, and that business meeting changed my perspective. Like I said, I'm leaving, like, in a couple months. I'm not gonna turn back. This was the scenario, Peter. The church I was attending sent around $1.2 million per year to the conference in ties. However, the same church was not receiving any support for the bills, any support for the AC, any support for the building itself. We were just running the church, hoping for the city not stop by and close the building. That was
Mm,
the structural situation of the church. However, every year the church was sending $1.2 million to the conference.
mm,
We reached a position that if we have any trouble, like someone passing out, a kid having a respiratory problem, and we need to call an ambulance or the firefighters to stop by at the church and help something that is not related to the building, not related to anything with the church, to a person. And that firefighters, first responder, enter the building and look the situation and identify problems, we'll have trouble. So they were voting to for the entire church to raise money over and over again to help to rebuild and fix the problem. But all the ties, they were flourishing out of the door. The money that really helped, who helped the church. I had meetings with the presidents of the conference. I had meetings with other people saying we need to hold at least 3%, 4%, 5% of the ties for this period of time so we can breathe a little bit and fix the problem without having to close the church in
Yeah.
any moment. However, after a meeting with the leaders of the conference, the president of the conference, he said to me, if you guys hold 1% of the ties, we're going to close the church on Monday.
Whoa.
That was the message that I left from the meeting.
Right.
Don't do it.
Yeah. Right.
So when I look back, and I was standing on the pulpit and looking to the church, a full church, 800 people. And when I was looking to them and just imagining in my mind, they were giving tithes, they were being faithful, they were giving the offerings, they were pushing as much as they can. And any moment the church will be closed. So their mentality said, no, we're gonna work hard. We're gonna doesn't matter the tithes, send the tithes to the conference, send the tithes, because the tithes belongs to the Lord. They are doing the good job, the evangelism. We have to spread the three angels' messages. Without this money, there's no three angels' message being spread, and Jesus is not gonna come. So just do the math. Money, three angels' message, Jesus coming, bringing people, Jesus faster to the planet. All this situation that is just a financial situation.
Yeah.
Show
Wow.
me that is not going to change.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. It is a corporation, and it has a very unique set of teachings that is very compelling for some people. And if those people are given what they need and want and desire and have fallen for, a Ted Wilson style or Erton Kohler style Adventism works more smoothly. It's
Mm,
the slick operation of the Adventist apologist, the
yeah,
slick movements of the marketing. If it's in line with a Ted Wilson style Adventism, it just works better. Like, I'm not saying
yes,
it is better for your mental health or better for your conscience or better ethically. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's a smoother, slicker machine that makes more money and is more streamlined and more organized.
yes.
So you set up a prophet, put her on high, bring out some mysticism and miracles, and talk about an end time that's coming any minute. You're
Hmm.
suddenly trapped in this kind of loop that just is an endless loop.
Yeah.
And once you're sucked into that, every single component of Adventism, every single person, every single type of Adventist in there works towards making sure that machine runs smoothly. That's what I've found with these interviews. I thought that the progressive Adventists were bucking against the system. No, they're
Mm-mm.
supporting it in just a more subtle way, in a different way. You know, they
Yeah, I agree.
add a bit of sheen and kind of authenticity, and it's
Agree. Agree with that.
it's a perfect storm.
And just to make a point in terms of back into Arthur Color as a president, one of the main messages, besides the evangelism and revelation, etc., the main message was the Adventist identity
Right. Yeah.
and the identity of being a Seventh-day Adventist. So first you were a Seventh-day Adventist, then you can be whatever you want. First you were an Adventist, then you were a Christian.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you have that inside of your mind and you're filling up like I am a Seventh-day Adventist, this is my identity, it turns even harder for that person take one part of their identity, of his or her identity, out and say, you know what, I'm going to live a different pathway with Jesus, I'm going to find a new moment with the Lord, but I have to take out part of my identity and throw in the trash.
Yeah.
That is a very strong strategy that go inside of your brain.
Mentally keeps you in. It's brainwashing. It's indoctrination.
Yes.
It's an incredibly clever, subtle deception. And this is why I say to progressive Adventism is not just a benign movement. It has doctrines in place, leaders in place, structures in place, politics in place to ensure that once you are in, you will continue contributing to it financially, emotionally, physically, and you will potentially create a machine that brings people in, raises young people into it, that will fall prey to the spiritual abuse. You know,
Yes.
I think you could bring someone into baptism and sure, into the Baptist church, and sure, they'll fall prey to, you know, bad people, politics, all sorts of those things. But it's not a mechanism that is designed to bring people in, and unless they toe the line, they can fall prey to spiritual abuse.
Yeah.
It's wired to be that effective. And I love what you were saying there, where you've got the, you know, we're talking about the end time Adventist and the Jesus time Adventist. You've got the, what's your answer? Do you believe Jesus can come anytime or only after the Sunday law kind of Adventist?
Yeah.
And then you've got the Adventist identity, where you have to ask yourself, am I an Adventist first, Christian second, or am I a Christian first, Adventist second? And those three things help define what kind of an Adventist you are. But either
Exactly.
way, whatever you define, you're still in the machine. And that
Yeah.
machine, potentially, you branding your name with that, potentially opens up for young people to grow into it and fall foul of the system, people to join it, stumble across some of the end time stuff, this kind of fearful Adventism in the Now book. It just, I don't know, in all good conscience, how can you put your name to something that is not benign, that almost guarantees young people and new members are going to just stumble into some of these pitfalls?
Yes.
So when
Yes.
you felt you couldn't put your name to it anymore, how fast did you act on that and leave?
So, as I said, we had to train people to replace us in the ministry of the church. I had a vice director, co-director, and she was always very talented person in the church. So we decided to go with her, and she was going through the process, learning some political movements that we have to have in the church. A church with four pastors that is entitled to have four pastors, and average had three pastors. So it's a very important church. So we had to move very wisely. So the sincere in the church will not notice that we're just turning our backs to the church completely in terms of, hey, that's it, it's over. Because after you say that, all the whys will come. Why you're leaving? Why is that? And then for each why, there's one person sincere that will have the movement to help you to turn you back to the Adventists, visiting you, calling you, sending emails. So imagine the entire church trying to do this at the same time that I know they will do. So we decided to very silently do this, make this movement in the church. So we wait for another 10 to 9 months. After that, my last day was on the pulpit with my entire family receiving the congratulations for our service in the church, probably around 6 to 7 years or average, and serving the church and receiving all the gifts from different ministries, from the pastors, being congratulated by the entire church, being receiving prayers, and the farewell happened. And we actually were trying to move to Canada during that time. We are family, but still didn't work at that point. But it combined the movement to trying to move to Canada plus leaving SDA at the same time.
Yeah, okay. So so you kind of helped, you got to a point where they saw you as leaving, but not necessarily the church. You were leaving your role in the church. At
And
what
leaving, yeah.
at what point did they begin to find out that you'd actually left the church? And now when you look at your Facebook group, like I'll just bring it up again. Where did it go? It's more obvious that you're now a little bit more opposed to the Adventist Church. So, for example, where is it? Here's your group, the Paraki Posamos, and you've got key Adventists there. You've got the some of the eyes blotted out like criminals. You've got 233,000 followers. Are
Yeah.
you being now more overt and publicly saying, "Hey, there's something to be careful of here. Adventism is is showing you a false gospel," or are you
Mhm.
still treading a little bit more carefully as softly as you go?
No, no. After the month of November, and when we left, I decided to build a project that represents what I wish I have when I was young, and something related to the history of the SD organization first, telling the history and telling this, the roots, the structure of the church from the beginning, and into a documentary format. So people can watch as, Netflix or any other documentary type and just watch, even if they don't agree with me or don't agree with the presentation, they will receive the information, the wave of information, and they will have to deal with that by themselves. I decided not to convince people that XYZ is wrong, but I just built a documentary, a movie. You watch the movie, and then you take that information and do whatever you want with that within yourself. So
And
that was my take.
is that documentary finished? Sorry to jump in there, but is it finished? We can share a link for that. Is that
We now have 3 seasons. The season number one is only focused from the beginning of William Miller all the way to the Great Disappointment and the day after.
right?
The second season is focused only on Ellen White since her birth, now all the way to 1851. And then the third season now is talking post 1851, and it's going to go all the way to 1915.
Oh, great. So people can find that on
If you
this.
go on YouTube and type the same name, Parakiposamos on YouTube,
It's on
you're
YouTube.
going to see all the videos. Yeah.
Awesome. And is there an English translation? No.
No, that's the point. But now with the two main technologies we have access now, 11 Labs and the Heijian, two big platforms, we now can translate the first and the second season
At least with
completely in
caption.
English,
With
and
caption.
with the voiceover in
Oh,
English.
really?
Yeah,
Wow. Wow.
it's going to be in English, Spanish, and
Yeah.
French.
And your focus though has been to your audience there in Brazil
Yes.
to
Yeah.
spread this news to Brazil. So how has that has there been any fallout from people that are Adventists, family, friends, past colleagues? What kind of pushback have you had? Like, are they going, Rodrigo, what are you doing?
Yes. Yes. In Brazil, primarily, we have a very, you know, reactive community of Seventh-day Adventists. They are very reactive. They are like, when you're rooting for your team, like the New York Yankees or anything related, they really dress the jersey and they defend the jersey all the way to the end. However, when I start building up the first season with just William Miller and post Great Disappointment, technically speaking, everybody knows the story. However, the level of details that I brought to the documentaries, they're very expanded. Like all the deaths that happened after the Great Disappointment, the problem that the cities had having people living in the streets that sold everything after believing that Jesus will come. The sanitary, all the sanitaries and all the mental institutions that received people back in the days after the Great Disappointment. So all the details that the church never tell people. The second season really actually, this one, the first season was fine, but the second season was the big big noise around the country because I started talking about the case of Ellen White, Israel Damon, and James White, are talking about that event, when crazy event, when everything happened. Unfortunately, sexual activities, revelations, multiple baptisms. Atkinson was the big episode that bring people to attention, and they, who's this guy? And then my family knew about it, and they came
Mm.
here to US to visit me. My parents are Seventh-day Adventists to this day. They preach in churches. They are evangelists. They have ministry with singles, Adventist singles. They are very popular in São Paulo. So they talk to me and say, well, "Okay, what is happening?
Right.
How did you discover that?" And after 1 year, we are bringing back our relationship to a point that we can talk about Bible, talk about Jesus, talk about uh, church without any extra
Yeah.
communications, extra fights.
Yeah.
So the family was the biggest point for me, but now things are going back to normal. For friends, or most of my friends, they are in silence, to be honest. They
Right.
are not they are not talking. They cut communications, and just a few of friends, they really talk with me if they are still Adventists, but they talk to me and they say, "Okay, I disagree with your project,
Mm.
but we're friends. That's fine. That's not a problem."
Right.
But most of my friends and social network,
Cut you
they
off.
just silenced.
Uh, I'm trying to work out, like, if you look into this kind of ministry that you're offering, uh, prior to you doing it, like I know on your YouTube channel you've got over 16,000 subscribers. Um, it's building and growing fast and gaining traction, but I can't think of any other ministry like yours having ever existed in Brazil prior to this, like in the kind of America, Europe, Pacific Islands, Australia, New Zealand. We've had all sorts of ministries, Good News Unlimited. There's so many people that are bringing this information to light
Mhm.
for decades. But for the Brazilian Adventist, and in South America, have there been others that have kind of been revealing Adventism, its roots, and some of the potential anti-gospel messages? Is there anyone else that has been doing that?
Yes, there are three. I can say three channels on YouTube talking
I
about
don't I don't
YouTube.
mean I don't mean currently. I mean historically.
Historically, yes. One is being led by Pastor Martinez. He was never a Seventh-day Adventist. He was always a Baptist pastor, but he decided into getting to the apologetic field, presenting the Adventist doctrines. He started in 2000, and with a website, just posting articles and presenting different types of news about blogs, videos. So he was very vocal, is the first one being vocal against Adventist doctrines. The second one is Paulo Cesar from TV Caminho Livre.
Yeah.
He was a Seventh-day Adventist, so he speaks with more authority in terms of, I live there, I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So he presents in a very important way, with the Bible in hands and a microphone,
And
and
he's a
showing
he's a
in the
former
Bible.
Adventist.
He's a former Adventist,
Yeah.
yeah. And then there's another channel that is Gleison Persio. He wrote three books in Portuguese called Unfolding Seven Day Adventist. And these three books have been shaking a lot of people in Brazil, because they're books that are very well documented, lots of footnotes, very well structured. Three volumes. The volume number three is coming out, is in Portuguese, and he's making it in English now. He's publishing in English this all the three volumes this year. So these three guys, they are pushing for a while, and I came after them. But my
Right.
format is a documentary style, like
Yes, yeah.
Netflix,
Got its own
HBO.
unique style,
Yes.
yeah.
So,
These other 3 or 4 ministries, when did they begin?
oh, they began way back. Like Paulo Cesar began, if I'm not wrong, he began in 2012, 2014. Pastor Martinez from the Center of Apologetics, he started in 2000. And Gleison Persha, I believe, is around 2014,
But see,
2016.
this is my point, though. There's these kind of revelations being shared finally to the broader Adventist community. They at least have a chance to see this stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas in Australia, Europe, America, USA, there's been decades of this material revealed, back to the white lie and stuff.
Hmm.
I'm suggesting that what you guys are doing is post 2000. Prior
Yes.
to that, there was nothing.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Because you remember the grace message from Alejandro Bullion,
Yes, yeah,
that that brought a environment of grace. So
yeah,
the other churches, they were saying they're fine, they're preaching Jesus. What
yeah,
should we worry about?
yeah,
But
yeah,
they were never told that to get into the baptismal, into the baptism, to get to the tank, you have to accept Ellen White.
yeah,
So they never
exactly,
knew that part, but they knew the part, the beautiful, the one that sounds good.
exactly, yeah. Well, good on you for bringing this whole scenario to light, to reveal it to people, and they can go away and decide for themselves.
Yes.
Steve Beagles has written "The Gospel is Going Global," and I think he's meaning the Adventist gospel, the gospel Adventist's message. Um, I I love what Stephen Beagles is doing. I wonder where it is going global, but in South America and Brazil, have they had to rely on books like this being translated into Spanish and Portuguese? What's the national language of Brazil?
Portuguese. Yeah.
Portuguese. Um, and I'm imagining that this kind of material, White Lie, anything by Des Ford, other books like this is a great book, the Who Watches, Who Cares.
Hmm.
I'm imagining that the church was prior to social media was pretty good at suppressing and ensuring that their members didn't have any contact with these kind of books. Is that true?
Is 100% true? But in Brazil, Peter, there's a very strong strategy in the SD organization, South American division. The strategy is they have a publishing house, the huge one. I think is the biggest in the entire world. It's so big, so powerful. They print books and materials for the entire South America. That was the firewall since 1900. They were established. The publishing house in Brazil, Adventist Publishing House, was established in 1900, 1901. From then all the way to today's date, Adventists only rely in their books. Whatever have their logo on the
Yeah,
cover, they read. If there's no
they
logo
don't
from the
read it.
publishing
Yeah,
house, it's not coming in my
yeah,
house.
yeah. That's very cultish to do.
Exactly.
To do that. Hey, we're going to have a short break. Usually in the hour and a half mark, I like to just do a little 5-minute break. Go and make yourselves a hot brew or a cold brew, depending where you are in the world. And we'll be back with Rodrigo Custódio. We're having a fantastic conversation. And after the break, I want to chat about what you think, because we've called today's program Seeking the True Gospel. I want you to compare and contrast the Adventist gospel from what you would say is the true gospel. So we'll talk about that after the break. And we're also going to go to some questions. So if you've got any questions right away, write, WRITE, during the break, and we'll pose them to Rodrigo when we get back. There's some really great comments that we'll look at there as well. We'll be back in about 5 minutes. Thanks, Rodrigo.
Let's go.
You love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. and all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, 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 I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, then all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, whoa, I will never be the same, will never be the same ever again.
Hello and welcome back, SDAQ&A. My very special guest today is Rodrigo Custódio. We are having a fantastic conversation. One of the things I love about SDAQ&A is I get to chat to so many different people, and honestly, I learn something new every day. And there have been some great gems there today. Look, I'm trying to find someone who can help me. I've tried to do this myself, and I'm just not organized enough, to be honest, to watch the programs and go, hey, that was a really good bit, and just to cut that little bit out. And I'm going to put together, I was going to start it as a whole new channel, but I'm not now. I'm just going to incorporate it into our existing channel. And they're just going to be SDAQ&A mini shows where we'll take a sample of what we've had today, 10 minutes maybe, put it out there with a link to the full interview. Because a lot of people just want to jump in and just catch a few minutes of SDAQ&A. And there's some gems spattered around everywhere. There are a couple of people who have come forward and said they'll help. But I'm keen to get someone to just regularly watch the show. No money in it for you, but I think it'll help build the channel. So if that's you, send me a message. I'd love to chat to you further. And I'm really keen to also chat to you, Rodrigo, about maybe getting some snippets of programs
Yeah.
that we can translate into Portuguese and get out there as well, just to help build the channel and share the news. Before we get into chatting about the gospel that you now see, I think in our promo notes you mentioned something along the lines of seeking the gospel. I can't remember what the wording was, but I think you've discovered a kind of a gospel. It may not be new, but it may be less filtered by Adventism. So I want you to kind of compare and contrast the Adventist gospel and your gospel. And is there, another little thing we can dig into is there a difference between the gospel Adventist and the traditional Adventist, their gospel as well? Is there a gospel that's separate outside of them, and that maybe the Adventist gospeler or the gospel Adventist hasn't actually grasped the real gospel after all? Shudder, sorry, didn't mean to hurt anyone's feelings there. And again, thank you everyone for your support. I've had $10 come in this week. I really appreciate all donations. Helps me continue the channel. If you're interested in supporting what I'm doing, you can scan that QR code, and look, $1 or $2 goes a long way. Really helps me continue with putting out this kind of content. And if you enjoy the music that you were listening to, you can go and listen to that whole album on Spotify there if you scan that QR code. Let's go to some of the comments here, and we'll go back a little bit as well. There were some good ones there. If you can translate this for me.
Para que possamos talking about helping life for Christ, or helping lives for Christ.
Great. So you've got a real, some people say, oh, your show's not focusing on the gospel. I'm thinking, are you watching the show? It gets plenty of chance to be aired. And what I love about that comment is that they're obviously saying that your channel it's not just about critiquing Adventism. You're saying, hey, set this aside maybe and go for the real thing.
Yes. In the middle of the videos, we always present, the gospel, and we have a slogan, or if you can say an ending saying. In every video, we say, reject Ellen White, accept Jesus Christ. So this is the closing quote for every single video. Reject Ellen White, accept Jesus Christ.
See, that is fascinating that you would say that, because a lot of people say, put Ellen White a little bit further in the back seat. But when you leave the Adventist church, you start leaning towards, look, you've got to reject her altogether.
Yeah.
Or at least say that, she's been incredibly wrong. And Angela asked this earlier, and you've kind of just answered it. You've talked about the TV Camino.
Yes.
And she adds there with Paulo Cesar. Is that correct?
Yeah, Paulo Cesar, he's a very voiceover professional,
Right.
and he did some videos for me. You have Paulo Cesar's voice in a lot of videos, and we did one entire Bible reading of the book of Galatians actually, and the book of Ephesians as well. And Paulo Cesar was the voice behind the reading, so he's a very special voice, a very special friend.
That's great. So when you say he's a specialist with voiceovers, you mean he will do the narrator's voice every now and again?
Yeah. He's a voice actor, and he
right.
produced. Yeah.
Right. James Andres, who we all hung out with there at Loma Linda, says, hi, my dear friends. Heroes par excellence. Thanks, James. And James is going to be on the show soon. Got some really good ideas we're going to unpack. We'll bring up a few hellos here. We've got Chris Lucas saying hi, everyone. Academy Apologia. James is watching. He's saying a big hello. It was great hanging out with him as well. And can we say our thoughts are going out to Test the Prophet? as well at the moment, who we caught up with at the show.
Yes, that's a prophet, special guy.
Now, Angela has said he wrote. Would that have been Paolo?
Yeah, what she's saying is like, meet Jesus or know about Jesus is everything. Meet
Right.
Jesus is everything. Learn about him, it's everything. Yes, and
Um,
there's a song. There's a very special song in Brazil that has the same name. Learn about or meet Jesus or know about Jesus is everything.
right.
From the composer who is now the president of communications in General Conference, Costa Jr.
Right. Right.
He's a Brazilian as well. I
Right.
also the vice co-director of communication as well is a Brazilian. So there's a lot of Brazilians now in the GC. Um, Ayrton Kohler is bringing everybody in.
Yeah, he is a powerhouse of a politician. That guy,
Yeah.
George Tichy, quite a while ago in the program, said Ayrton Kohler is the next GC president. And how much has he reduced his chances by having, not associated with or involved with, but the dirt that rubs off that whole financial fiasco? Has he reduced his chances 50-50 of getting elected as president, or only by 10%?
I don't know because first this is something that the GC has total control over the situation, total control of the information. And Ayrton Killer is the guy who holds the information as well through the channels. So it's very complicated to hurt him in a very high level if it takes time. And the dust is just settling down. Things are going down, the noises start silencing, so it will prepare him for a better position in the future, I guess.
Right. So it may just delay perhaps his becoming
Yes, yes.
president. And so, George, if you're still watching, maybe Finlay will step in after all, just as an intermediary, and then I'll win that milkshake. And Angela has written, George agreed.
Yep.
He's a clone of Ted Taliban. Oh, dear.
um,
Gillian Ford. Hey, Gillian. Gillian is watching, and she's said that my understanding is that he is unlikely to go in because of this current fraud going on in Brazil. And because of this, Ted will go in again, meaning, I think, and I know nothing, she's saying, that he is not necessarily fraudulent, but being Brazilian would work against him because of what else is going on there. Is that right, George? She's asking back to George. And she also adds, doesn't know much, but was told this by another Brazilian friend, not George. Is Good News Unlimited big in Brazil, in South America?
what do you mean, sorry?
Is Good News Unlimited the movement that began after Des Ford was kicked out?
Now that I heard, no, now that I heard in Brazil, um, I believe Brazilians. I used to call Brazil as the North Korea of the Seventh-day Adventist church organization, because whatever happens there stays there.
That's so funny. I used to say to people that Adventism is North Korea minus the weapons.
Yeah,
It's. I won't say the word. I said it once, and my channel was muted. But they're very controlling, shall we say?
yeah,
Angela also points out we mentioned earlier, Pirates of Privilege is a must read. And this is good to know. Angela translates. So maybe,
yeah,
Angela, you could help out and we can do some voiceovers and get some of this. I would love to share my show more with South America. That's for sure.
yeah. And
Um,
that's one thing that is important to mention. Like the former Adventist fellowship that we went to, they have a branch in Brazil, and they are being led by Deborah Buffon and also Manu Bosia. They are leaders in the ministry trying to bring the former Adventists from California to Brazil and expand the message as well. So this is happening. I think it's good to mention that as well.
yeah, good. Angela messages here, preparation for the final crisis is a scary book.
Agree.
Yeah.
Agree.
And James has added scary for sure, but also flagrantly heretical in the usual guise of instruction how to be saved.
Yeah.
It's funny, you can go and read the 4 Gospels and learn how to be saved, even with the education of a low high school level education. But to understand Adventism and the IJ and the Sanctuary, you need a PhD to really understand it. Barry Ford. I'm just going to read out a few things. You're okay with me doing that, Rodrigo?
Yes,
Just
100%.
so we can comment and reply and answer
Yeah,
questions here. Barry Ford has written, fear does work with many people. Other churches do teach to keep short accounts, but don't tie it with salvation. Yeah, and fear permeates all religions and movements, and it's an incredible tool to use. Fear suppression, like even ordination, women's ordination. It's not that ordination is the issue; it's that it's not allowing women to be ordained. So ordination becomes a weapon.
yeah.
That's when it becomes wrong.
In Brazil, we have women being ordinated as a first elders.
Right.
That is
Yes.
happening.
Yeah. I think that's happens over here as well. James writes, I encounter more and more SDAs who yearn for historical Adventism, and to such a degree that Arianism is their belief. This faction is fracturing current Adventism.
Yes.
Yeah, good comment there. George has written, Hellenism is very strong in Brazil.
Agree.
And A.O. Sigal has put in Indonesia as well. I would say Hellenism is rife, no, not rife, strong for every single Adventist, even those who don't know it. They're marinated in it. And
Yes.
even the gospel Adventists love Ellen. They just love her. She brought me to Jesus. So I read Desire of Ages and it gave me a closer encounter with Jesus. Yeah, but it's just
Mm-mm.
so what? I mean, people say, oh, I read Joseph Smith and the Book of Mormon, and it brings me closer to Jesus. It doesn't mean it's not filled with error.
There's a little joke that we say, like, Ellen White is the fourth person of the Trinity.
Oh, my goodness. Jillian adds, I do like that comment that Jesus is watching the new and waiting for the Sunday law to come. Yeah, that was that comment you said, that you can kind of have a demarcation line or a line in the sand as to what kind of Adventist you are. Do you say it again for us, because you said it really well.
Yeah, we have to ask questions to Adventists, like saying, when Jesus is coming. When do you think Jesus is coming? And the big answer is before, anytime. Actually, anytime, could be now, tomorrow, next day after tomorrow, or only after the Sunday law. So that is a very straight answer that any Seventh-day Adventist will give you, or one or another. And from that, you can understand what kind of
Mm,
Adventist that person is.
Yeah, yeah. Is your North Star the Jesus of the gospel, or is your northern star or North Star the end times, the
Yes.
Sunday law? George, when we were talking earlier about all the financial stuff, I think he's referring to, it sounds like La Cosa Nostra.
Yeah. Yeah.
Avis Johnson writes, I remember when I was a kid and there was any perceived political move towards the Sunday law, someone would get up in church and tell the congregation to write to the legislators to show opposition.
Mhm.
Wouldn't they be hindering the return of Christ by opposing that?
And I heard a comment yesterday about the law in, I believe in Mississippi, Louisiana, I guess, Louisiana, when the government said all the Ten Commandments has to be inside of inside the schools, inside the children's, kindergarten, pre-Ks, schools all over the state. It's mandatory to have the Ten Commandments portrayed in the space. And then a Seventh-day Adventist went to Instagram complaining, saying this is against freedom of religion. Why should we be forced to have the Ten Commandments? And I found that extremely funny, because if Jesus is coming only after the Sunday law, just let the games begin.
Yeah, bring it on.
That's it. We stop with this conversation of, oh, we're Seventh-day Adventists. We're fighting for freedom of religion, freedom of each one having your own religion, your own space. Stop doing that because you need the Sunday law to get Jesus coming back to this planet. So you can't fight from the facts that you're preaching out, technically speaking.
Yeah, yeah. There's a funny one I want to bring up by Nitro Janks, but I can't because his language is a little bit misty. But yeah, thanks Nitro, hilarious. GD has written, Rodrigo is doing excellent work in Brazil.
Thank you. Thank you. Praise God.
We've got Isaac Cabrera. I ended up being a sad Adventist at the end before I left. GD has written, Brazilian SDAism was too comfortable in its bubble where most members don't speak English. Rodrigo's channel popped that bubble and is becoming a thorn in the side of the leadership there.
Yeah, praise the Lord.
I think huge things are happening for you and about to explode even more so. Two members in the Canberra church I attended went to join David Koresh in the States, so I can believe that progression of fanaticism that you were mentioning earlier. Isaac Cabrera has written, the church, it's like the Republicans and Democrats. One pulls a church in one direction and then the other comes and pulls it in another direction, and back and forth they go.
Yeah.
George did ask a question about what church was that. I can't remember what we were talking about when that came through, though. Just if there's anything you've seen there you want to highlight, just let me know. We were talking earlier about tithes and how that church. Oh, that's what George was saying. Which church were you talking about that nearly shut down, and the church said they still had to give their tithes? Rick has put, bring the whole tithe into the storehouse so that there may be food in my house. The tithes were supposed to feed who in Christ's house? The poor, the needy. It wasn't just a monetization to send into, officially it's to pay the pastors, isn't it? I can't remember.
Yeah. And to the point Rick is mentioning now, in Brazil, we had an experience when a pastor received a lot of backlash because he did something that not other Seventh-day Adventist pastor did ever. He was in the pulpit preaching at the end of the sermon, and he was talking about what Jesus would do, and in any XYZ situations. And then he came to the financial situation. So he stood up and say, hey, this is the pulpit. I have a person here that spoke to me this morning before the sermon saying, I need to bring food to my family. I have no food in my house. So the pastor said, I want everybody to come to the pulpit right now, walk through the aisles and bring cash and put the cash on the top of the pulpit. And all the cash we collect now, you're going to give straight to her right on my side.
Wow.
When people, to be honest, it took 5 minutes for them to realize what was happening, because they're connecting. I will give money, and the money will not go to the church. The money will go to the person.
Yeah, they struggled with that. Yeah,
they they shake that a little bit. Then after the first 6 or 7 start coming in and depositing money there and offering, everybody, a big wave of people in the church walk into the aisles and putting money. They collect a lot of money for their family that day. The pastor received a lot of backlash because part of that money should be going to the church.
Yes.
That was one of the saddest situations that pastor faced.
Yeah. I don't know if you found this as a musician. Someone recently criticized me. They said, oh, you're attacking the church that kind of supported you and paid for your ministry. And I'm like, do you even understand what it's like to be a musician in the Adventist church? Paid me? Yes, for sure. I did some social nights and we had some country nights, and we call them barn dancing, and people would pay me to do that. But I remember in a 2-year period, I did 500 song services in a 2-year period. And I think I remember one guy negotiating with me at a camp I'd be lucky to get fuel money. I don't.
Mhm.
Most of those were just free, traveling around. And this one pastor had said, "We'll give you $150 to come and play for us at this camp," and that was pretty much fuel. And I played for 3 days each program. And I remember at the end of the weekend he was negotiating, "Can I give you $71?" And I don't know why he went to $71. And he had his checkbook. He said, "I can write it right now for you. Can we make it $71?"
Hmm.
I'm like, "Hey, yeah, if you guys can't afford it." So this kind of money machine, they don't offer it back to the creatives. They don't offer it back to the churches.
Mhm.
Um, where's it all going? It's all going into
Yeah. I have so many experiences, Peter, in the board meetings in the church. I can mention one, for example. We had a person who had, unfortunately, a family had their house caught on fire, and was Friday, right before the service on Saturday. So the church had a fund to support people in the church, a fund that was like 2% of the total of offerings. 2% goes to this fund. But how the entire house caught on fire. It's not about 2%. It's a lot of more than that. So it took 3 weeks, three board meetings, lots of voting no's to collect money from the departments. The money was already there to bring down from the departments to collect to give to the family because they were not sure if they're gonna have enough for the rest of the month to
mm,
take care of the ministers.
yeah, yeah. And look, I understand how difficult it would be to suddenly go, okay, let's give the money out to people who need it, because you're going to then have people come along and say, hey, I need it. I've got a problem, and they don't.
Yep.
So I'm not even suggesting, that I would say they had to do it differently, but there's just a sense of kind of a misery kind of role they play when it comes to pastoral care and helping people in need. And look, just to highlight, if I went back in time and had my 30 years in ministry within the church again, I would not change that. I would be happy to donate my time for my musical ministry and stuff. I'm not complaining about that.
Praise the
The,
Lord.
the
Yeah.
grassroots supported what I did. I managed to survive and thrive and raise a family, and so I'm not complaining or calling victimhood. I'm just highlighting that when someone says, "Stop attacking the church," no, I'm not attacking. I'm scrutinizing. I'm shining that light. Can you guys defend your beliefs?
Hmm.
And once you've thought about it and drawn your own conclusions, good on you. Go for it. Stay an Adventist, leave the church, do whatever you want. But
Yeah.
I'm just highlighting that no, I'm not attacking the church. And no, I wasn't being funded by the church. It was all my own money. And occasionally I'd get some support. And I'd do it all again. I'm not complaining. I would do it all again.
Amen.
Academy Apologia has written, Adventism is a highly structured, multi-tiered organization. Um, Avis Johnson has said, the SDA Church sounds like a cult to me. Angela Lima has said, Avis, they are a cult. What are your thoughts on that? Is it more of a sect, or does it have some qualities of a cult?
I believe at this point, we're the Seventh Day Adventist Church is a cult portrayed as a church. It's like Disneyland. It's all fake. Mickey Mouse doesn't exist. The princess doesn't exist. The castle, it's all scenographic. It's just a theater. So I believe the SD church can become a church if they let Ellen White on behind, just behind.
But then they'd
And
probably crumble.
this is the point that I will say that, Peter. I believe that we're going to see the congregationalist era of the Seventh Day Adventist Church very soon. When people from the church led pastors or people who really believe in the values of being a Seventh-day Adventist, but do not defend the four main doctrines of the church, they will start new projects, new churches with the Sabbath keeping, with the maybe the health message, maybe, but not a Sabbath for salvation, not a eating meat for salvation, or not Sunday law, etc. I believe we're getting to this point in maybe in 20 years.
Yeah. Yeah. I interviewed someone the other day, and they were talking about the North American division that there's just over 1 million members or something like that, but maybe 500,000 are attending. Don't quote me, but the point is a bigger number, a smaller amount actually attending, and even less holding on to that righteousness by faith gospel Adventist view. I think maybe they were thinking in the whole of North America around 50,000 people,
Yeah.
and that it's dying. And so the church itself is relying on the funds they get from the places in the world where it is seeming to be growing. Would you say that in South America, Adventism, the Ted Wilson kind of Adventism is growing, or is it just the numbers being doctored to make it look like it is?
Yes, they're cooking the books in Brazil as well. This is a fact. Actually, Dr. Trim always complain about the facts and the true numbers that are getting their people are getting to him. I believe that is just a generational situation.
Right.
I can take, for example, from my parents. They are here now. One day they're not going to be here. And so, if they're not here, they're not going to be here to defend the Ted Wilson Adventism. The sons and daughters, they are more likely to build or defend a Seventh-day Adventist without Ellen White, because that makes more sense historically speaking, prophetic speaking. It makes more sense to concentrate in Jesus and Jesus alone, and forget the rest, and still, like, let's keep this habit, or let's believe in this XYZ values the church is defending, but not the doctrine itself. So I don't see the next generation defending Ted Wilson's Adventism.
Interesting.
I see the Adventism becoming a Jehovah Witnesses in less than 2 decades.
And yeah, and I've heard that financially they're struggling as well. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah.
And those that kind of herald the gospel Adventism, the gospelers, they're all retired or dying. And I don't see them raising up any kind of movement within the church that follows that kind of gospel Adventism. Though people like Stephen Beagles are trying, I just don't see where it's working and taking off. It's not growing. It doesn't seem to be growing. Rick points back to that tithing comment earlier. The Apostle Paul never received tithe. He sometimes received offerings, but most of the time he never lived off offerings, but worked to supply his needs while spreading the gospel. And that's how I survived too. I would do all sorts of other gigs in the secular world to survive. And I had a music shop as well, which was a lot of fun. I had that, but it was more of a place to go during the day when I wasn't traveling. And I used to put a sign on the door if I was away, I'll be back in May or something like that.
That's fine.
Let's go through. George has asked again which church that was. Do you remember what he was referring to?
Oh yeah, he's asking the church I attended. I don't feel comfortable saying the name.
You can send him a private
Yeah,
message
I can
later.
tell you George later.
Okay, so we're going to have to skip a few here. Here's someone.
Peter is. Sorry, go ahead.
I'll just do this one, and then we'll do the one you're talking about. Question: how much cognitive dissonance, this is from Marie, is there when you compare the true gospel with traditional Adventists as compared to Ellen G. White version among the communities there or in your YouTube community?
It's a great question. And I never expected, to be honest, to have both sides on the channel talking about and sometimes fighting about, fighting a lot. But I see the Adventists are the mainstream audience of my channel. And Adventists that truly believe the Seventh-day Adventist Church is the remnant, people who truly believe in Ellen White, but they still watching the videos, they still participating in the community, they still looking to the content and learning from the content, so they can either silence or fight. But I believe honestly, the sometimes in the comments it hurts to see how complicated for them is to understand the clear facts. The clear fact that, for example, Ellen White told everyone that the falling of the skies happened, and then you prove that the stars never fell that way in a prophetic way. It is happening every 33 years, and you prove that you show the stars, actually the asteroids flowing in the air. You show the picture, and they said no, she was right. She was right. What happened, that was a revelation, completion of a prophecy. She was right. So that sometimes hurts because you see that, and I can see myself because I would do the same. I would say I would stick with Ellen White forever, stay with her, hold her hand all the way to the end, until, as Apostle Paul happened, like the blindfold just fell and he couldn't see actually what was happening. So all this covering that is on your eyes, only Jesus and the Holy Spirit can take from you. It's challenging, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. Andy Mack likes your comment you said earlier: reject Ellen White, accept Jesus Christ.
Yes.
And I know Andy has been on a journey. I'm not sure if Andy has officially left or on the fringe or still going through a lot of the processes. But hearing you say something like that, I'm sure Andy brings you some solace, because I like the way you think. Really, you give us some thoughts there, Rodrigo, that are this or that. They're not. We don't have to go into the nuanced.
Mhm.
I loved a lot of the things you've said in today's program that fall along those lines. Andy, send me a text. Want to have you back on the show. I'd like to bring up people I haven't heard that often. And sorry, after this one, we'll go to what you were mentioning. Manu Boskia.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Bossia. So nice to see you there. Love Peter's show. And also, of course, a huge fan of Rodrigo's work, reaching so many people in need of Christ. God bless you both. Thank you, Manu. Yeah, James did a great program recently on the stats. So that's, I think, where I was drawing my knowledge from before and getting a little bit incorrect. So, James, maybe we can have you back on the show and share some of these stats with us. The North American and European divisions are dying and decreasing. The African and South American divisions are increasing. Can we expect more African and South American GC leadership? What are your thoughts on that?
I see that every time the 7-day Adventists, as a general conference, as organization, are in trouble, numbers of membership, trouble in numbers of financial numbers, money wise, they run straight to the Africa to baptize people, because that the baptisms, and I'm not saying people are not being baptized in their legit way. People are not. I'm not saying they're just taking people and throwing in the water. This is not what I'm saying. I'm saying that they go where it's easy to make numbers, so they can use those numbers as a marketing tool to the regions they are suffering with the numbers. This is my understanding. So is if you look back in time, when the church goes to Africa, is because the other regions are suffering.
Right, right. Cindy Lou, who I have also invited on the show, it's going to happen one day. She writes that she was a mad Adventist with occasional relapses as her PSTD deprogramming continues to ebb and flow. Oh, MC is back. Tithing is a feature of the Nicolaitans to conquer laity. The flow of money is from the laity to the clergy. Bad scene. Not the same as the 11-to-1 ratio that went to the Levites. Yeah, good point. Sorry, you saw something there you wanted to comment on. What was that again?
I believe it was George. He was talking about a pastor in Brazil named Edson Nunes Jr.
Oh, yep, here we go. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a huge story. I don't think we have time to go through the details, but this is a story of a pastor of a very modern, new generation gospel Adventist called New Seed in São Paulo, Brazil. It was a church that he was leading as a senior pastor for a lot of time, long years, and the church was doing well financially. It was growing, attracting a lot of people, and that is a huge formula in Brazil. If you have a church that it doesn't look like traditional Adventist with the whole, the whole sequence of events of the church, five people in, the middle is the preacher, the whole scenario. If you have a different church, even with a band playing with drums, attract a lot of people in Brazil, Adventists that flow out of their traditional church to this new place. And that was a liberal Seventh-day Adventist church. They were liberal in terms of inclusive. They were inclusive church. They were accepting people from all different backgrounds. So it's a very relaxed church. So that was a problem. That became a problem for the organization because the other churches, they have to follow the script. They have to follow the pattern. And because of that and so many political moves behind the scenes, the pastor he would kick off of the church. They fire him without any reason. Actually, he received a letter from the church saying, "This pastor is amazing. He did nothing wrong. He's perfect, but we don't want him in this church again." And
Wow.
the funny thing is they tried to move him out of Brazil to the United States and exile him, so the noise around the whole process will be, diminished.
Yeah.
After that, he started a new church saying the name is Community. In São Paulo, they are gathering during the Saturdays in the morning, but it's the same church, the same format they had before as a lead pastor, but now he has his own church. So he decided, you guys are not accepting me as as a pastor, since I did nothing wrong, so I can open my own church and start my own project. So they defend the Adventist values in this church. Is an
Right.
inclusive church, embrace everybody, but is his own church now. So it's the
Right.
first in Brazil.
Right. Well, there you go, George. If you can track down Pastor Edson Nunes Jr., invite him on the show for me. You're good at doing that. He'd be a very interesting person to interview, as
Yep.
is my guest today, Rodrigo. I'm loving our conversation. We're going to have to do this again and again down the track. Academy Apologia, James writes, the SDA official membership is 22 million, but Ty Gibson says attendance is around 6 million. I
Agreed.
encourage people to go and check out James's channel because there's a full-on episode about that topic. Cindy Lou writes, Uncle Arthur's bedtime story, where there's 3 hungry children. The only food in the house is it's a peanut butter jar, but there's a full tithe jar on the mantelpiece. And the mama eyes the jar. Satan's whispering, you use that money, use it to buy food for your children. But mama is a good girl and Satan slinks away. That kind of story is just...
That's terrible.
it permeates the whole of the Adventist kind of marketing. They just love that kind of stuff. And you do not find those kind of fear-based stories permeating and marinated in other Protestant churches.
No.
The fact is, Adventism is not a benign. It doesn't help you avoid these kind of stories. They sell those books by the squillion.
Yep.
Dale is watching. Just joined. Hey, Dale. Good to see you. Go back and watch. This is amazing. Now, Cindy Lou has just asked a question, which we mentioned a bit earlier. She joined a little bit later today. Yes, there is a YouTube channel. I'll just bring up for you to see there, Cindy Lou. Just the para que posamos.
Perfect. Yep.
If you type that into YouTube, it comes up as
Yep.
the YouTube channel there. And you can enjoy, if you speak a little bit of Portuguese there, Cindy Lou, that channel. But also, Rodrigo was saying that you can click the captions and it should come up in English translations there. There's ways to get around it these days. Let's see. We'll bring Manu back in here. It's not only music. Pretty much everything that is done in SDA church is done for free by volunteers. It was very interesting realizing that in other churches that wasn't a formal thing. Yeah, and I'm kind of like, to be honest, here I am saying, hey, if someone wants to volunteer helping me edit some of these videos, no money in it for you. I like the idea of volunteering and donating time, and I certainly enjoyed doing that. In fact, I was involved with a couple of projects where I endeavored to pay. We were doing a worship album of praise and worship songs written by musicians in our conference. And, the church did put up $5,000 for it. And I endeavored to pay the musicians and pretty much ran out of money because of that. And so the project, I had to put in some of my own money to finish it. So, I like the idea of volunteering and giving of your time and that kind of thing. I just don't like, I feel like the Adventist church misuses their money. This Brazilian financial fiasco, Davenport, in the Davenport in 1979, I think it was 20 million, 1979 US dollars of church money that was put in. People might want to fact check that, but I'm pretty sure it was a lot of money. That just is endless stories like that, where that book I held up earlier, the Who Watches, Who Cares. I did a great interview there with Douglas Hackelman. This book's amazing, and the revelations of misadventures in stewardship. Who watches, who cares? Misadventures. It's a thick book because there's tons of misadventures. Yeah, all churches do, all movements do, all organizations, all corporations, down to your local folk music club. There's all sorts of misuse of, misadventures in stewardship. But I don't know. Adventism kind of gears itself to just kind of pull the wool over the little lambs. We'll bring up Jennifer quick here. Churches like to elect older people and those with higher incomes to office. When people feel important in the church, they tend to give more. George writes this. I didn't know this, George. Edson Noons, senior, was my classmate in high school.
Yeah.
We're gonna get you to start talking about the gospel you have found post Adventism and how it differs from the Adventist gospel in just a moment. So just get your mind pondering those thoughts. Today on all social medias, the Seventh-day Adventist Church has lost control of the narrative. Boy, that's a very good point. I mean, if you look at your channel there, over 16,000 subscribers on YouTube, 233,000 followers in your Facebook group.
Yeah.
That's just incredible. I think yours is the biggest Adventist-related social media platform in the world.
This is a very funny story because just for you to have an idea how connected I was with the Seventh-day Adventist Church, I started a project in 2016 called SDA News. It was a Facebook page, just a regular Facebook page with two goals. Goal number one, republish or restream sermons, and the number two, music. The Seventh-day Adventist music in Brazil is very strong. They have lots and lots of choirs, groups, bands, solo singers, etc. So I use the music and the sermons to build up a page and just share the word. Basically, that was the main goal. In 2000, before COVID, 2019, uh, we reached 200,000 Adventists. I was a 7-day Adventist at the time. So we were pretty much reaching every single month. The total reach was 50 million people per month. So that reach elevates the message of the Seventh-day Adventist for many years, for millions and millions of people. So after everything happened and I left church, I looked to the page with this amount of followers that was saying SDA News. And I said, I'm going to just shut down the page. Just going to delete the page. It's over. Have no deal with this doctrine anymore. That's it. But then I asked my wife and say, what do you think? What should I do with that? And she said, turn it to the Parkiposamos and transform it, flip it. I say, but if I flip the page, people will leave immediately. If any post, any text, any video, any music, anything related that is not Seventh-day Adventist with the seal of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, the people will reject. They're just going to run. So I'm going to end up with 10 people watching me. So that was 2021, then 2022, and now the numbers are there. They didn't left. Actually, I gained 1,000 members average per month,
Yeah.
and 50 people left. So Seventh-day Adventists, they are not scared to listen things against their doctrine or their organization. No, they're not against that. They are against if you present something in a way that is judgmental or is you're diminishing their faith or themselves or their identity, as I mentioned before. So they still there, they still following the page, they still watching the videos, most of them in silence. But I just received in January this year, Peter, 300 families sent letters of leaving SDA Church in Brazil in January.
Wow.
They told me these are messages that I received, more than 300 families.
Wow.
Like talking about 3 people, 4 people, 6 people,
Yeah.
300 families.
Families.
And
Yeah.
when that happened, the red light pops up in the DSA in Brasilia and the capital of Brazil, and where is the capital, where the center of the South American division is located.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. And I think if people leave the church, not telling what people what they should do, but if you not only leave but also take your name off the rolls and really push it, if they're resisting letting you do that, push it. That legally you can do it. Your name is on a roll. If you're a baptized Adventist, you've signed an agreement, and you're on the roll there somewhere, you can remove your name from it. And by removing it, you actually help the church have a more accurate presentation of the numbers, and they can't misuse the numbers. As we said earlier, that, like James said, 22 million official Adventists. Ty Gibson saying, yeah, maybe only 6 million. And Ty's quite a traditional kind of an Adventist, but presenting in a slick marketing fashion.
Mhm.
I don't think he would be revealing that. I was surprised he revealed that number, but I think he's doing it to kind of give people a kick up the bum and say, come on, come back to church, stop just sitting at home. I think he had a different, but indirectly revealed a very interesting statistic.
Yeah, if you go online on a Saturday morning, go Saturday morning online and just type on YouTube, type SDA service live or SDA church live. Go on through the list, all the live streamings that are happening, the services. Click on each one. They have cameras, they're open and they show the church. You're gonna see
Oh,
how many
really?
people are attending. Yeah.
All around the world?
You can go all across the world. You can see
Where
how
do you
many.
go for that? Because
You
I'd
can
love
just
to.
go on YouTube and go live SDA service or live SDA church
Yeah,
service, and you're going to see a list of live
going
services.
live.
And
Yeah,
you're going to click, you're going to see how many people are attending.
yeah.
The
It's
churches are empty.
empty. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I know. A lot of them are starting to steer their cameras just to the pulpit because they know that when they scan into the audience, there's like 5 people here and there. Yeah, yeah. I want to kind of use that resource as well, because I have a lot of people write to me and say, "Oh, I went to church last week, and in light of some of the things you've been talking about, I realized the minister wasn't preaching the gospel." And I'd love to use that resource to go in, and maybe we can have a fun SDAQ Q&A program where we just go in and just skip to different churches and watch the sermons and just see what they're actually preaching.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a fun side thing. But that takes us to this concept of just quick, Stephen Beagles has written, Adventism is not the enemy, Peter. It is unjust abuse of power that is the problem. I'd suggest that there's a little bit of enemy in there with regards to the doctrines that are being presented, though I know, Stephen, you believe all those doctrines can be supported by the Bible. However, if it's an abuse of power that you think is the problem, I think James and Ellen created the template of how to abuse power. And so I don't think it's a new thing. I think it's been fostered
Yep.
and curated, and is now the machine that it has become because of that. But so yes, you're probably right there, Stephen. But I think it's always been there and always will be there. And so the good work that you do with Gospel Adventism shining its light, I think, can only go so far. Unfortunately, I've tried to help, give it a bigger platform. So I'm not opposed to that at all. Now, tell us, Rodrigo, as our title today is Seeking the True Gospel, what kind of scales fell from your eyes as you began to look at the gospel from the Bible, and tell us what you like about the gospel and what stood out as being different to Adventism?
Mm. I can tell you a short experience I had with a friend when I was a 7-day Adventist, so that I can bring the perspective when I was a 7-day Adventist. I had a friend, we play in a band together in the church, and he was playing guitar, electric guitar, and he came from the Assembly of God in Brazil. He converted to 7-day Adventist. Very powerful guy, friend. And one day he called me to, let's drink a coffee, let's talk about something. I want to tell you something. After 5 years playing together in the church, he said, "Hey, I'm leaving." And I said, "Why are you leaving, man? Well, what are you talking about?" "No, I'm leaving because I don't feel like this church, I can't belong to it. I can't be part of this church." So, okay, what is your problem? Tell me, and I can 100% sure I can bring you back. It's something, maybe a misunderstanding. And he said, "This is my point. I left the church a while ago. I'm just telling you now. I'm attending a different church. And I'm feeling that I don't have any debt with Christ. I don't have any debt with God." When I was a 7-day Adventist, he was saying, "I had the feeling that every single day when I bow my knees, when I prayed, I was in debt with Christ, in debt with God. And my life could be taken at any moment and my salvation would be gone. I was living in constant pain, constant fear. Is a subconsciously fear. And after I left in silence and I started attending a different church, I figured out the true gospel. I can't stand anymore." And I try to use all the 7-day arguments you can ever imagine. And he was saying, "I am in peace. I'm not struggling anymore." And that stuck in my head for a while because I never noticed him while he's playing, while he's worshiping, while he was having fun in the church, while we were playing the worship, talking with pastors, playing in the Pathfinders. I never noticed that. I never noticed that guy suffering inside. So that
Mm.
triggers me a lot. When I
Wow.
came to the 7-day Adventist, Investigated Judgment, all the Revelation series I mentioned before, the whole conversation came back. And I start feeling exactly like the same feeling like this is heavy. It's not supposed to be heavy. Gospel, Jesus, salvation, the gospel should not be heavy. Jesus died on the cross. He paid the price. So why I have to carry all this luggage, all this baggage of My angel is writing my name. I have to have my book clean. I have my get ready for run through the mountains and go to the top of the mountains because they are going to persecuting me. They're going to kill me because I keep the Sabbath. All this conversation, all this situation came back to my mind. That conversation with my friend, and I got it. I understood the point he was telling me.
Right.
And then I say, okay, so what is the gospel? What is the gospel? And I learned that I didn't know Jesus since the beginning.
Wow.
This, as Gene Baber say all the time in his channel, the Seventh Day Adventists follow a different Jesus.
Mm.
And when you realize that, and you look to the cross, and you realize that that Jesus is completely different than the archangel Michael, is a completely different from someone below God and a little bit above Satan, as Ellen White said in the book of History of Redemption. All that plot of the great controversy, of the whole structure of the 7 Day Adventist goes away like if you're washing your clothes. The water is just going down, and then you feel yourself just empty with the Bible and the Bible alone, and looking to the gospel and saying, all right, nice to meet you, Jesus. That's you. I was looking to a different person all the time. That is the main feeling that stumbles, that cracked me from the beginning. So after leaving SDA, you have to do your baby steps. And I learned about the grace again. I learned about ties that have nothing to do with salvation. I learned that keeping the Sabbath or eating pork or whatever is not related. Well, it has no power over the cross. That is the great discovery when you look to Jesus and say, "Hey, Jesus, thank you for what you've done, so I can just live my life and give my life to you 100% without ties with any organization in terms of keeping this, doing that, following that, or expecting a conspiracy of a Sunday law or something related." So the pure gospel is something that Seventh Day Adventists can find if they dig and blind their eyes for all the other doctrines. That's why it's so hard in the Seventh Day Adventists to know the true Jesus, the real Jesus Christ. So the investigated judgment, the doctrine of the Sabbath, the prophecies of the end times, and the authority of Ellen White. All these four columns, they hold people hostage to a different understanding of the gospel. So they are not free because there are four walls. If you break one wall, they're going to build another one based on the other three columns. And they are all interconnected somehow in the church. That's why it's so hard. One day I asked my dad, and I said, my dad said, "No, there's no problem. It's okay if you don't believe in Ellen White, just trust in Jesus, etc." And I said, "All right, how do you feel if I go to a Sabbath school, I raise my hand and I say, Ellen White was wrong? How do you feel? How do you going to be received in the church in the next Saturday, next
Mm.
Sabbath? You're going to have a big target on your back, and people will look at you saying, you're becoming an apostate. You're just leaving the church in your mind, for you're leaving physically, it's just a matter of time. Don't trust him for any leadership in the church. Don't trust him for anything to represent this church anymore. He don't believe in Ellen White." So it's hard when you can't stand up in the middle of your community and just say she was wrong.
No.
So when you realize that, it's complicated. So I found the grace of Jesus Christ. I found the real Jesus just looking through the Bible and putting everything else inside of a big box and forgetting and just burning that box and starting a new life and pretty much just restarting as a baby and learning everything about all the covenants, the first covenant, the second covenant. What is covenant? Nobody never taught me that in the side of the Seventh Day Adventist Church. Second covenant, what are you talking about? There's only the Moses covenant. We have to keep that out. What is the Jesus commandment? What are you talking about? There's only 10. So all that conversation, all this talking about grace, the book of Galatians is a key so you can open the or your chains, you can open your door for salvation. I said to anyone, just read the book of Galatians and you're gonna figure it out the exit. It's transforming. It transforms your heart. It transforms your mind. When you read Galatians and you're inside of the Seventh Day Adventist Church, you look to the door and say, I can't stay here anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. Angela, as you were saying that, I'll just bring it up. She said, bottom line, Jesus would not be a member of the SDA Church.
Yeah.
And I think for the gospel Adventist who wants to stay, of course, stay. But as in my interview yesterday, Brian Neumann said that they have to say, admit we're not who we originally claimed to be. So if you want to be a gospel Adventist, there's so much evidence to suggest that Ellen White wasn't who she said she was, presented doctrines that are unbiblical, though God was in her ear saying, this is the message I want you to pass on, which she later then changed or watered down, like the shut door, like the American dress, like the food for worms vision. For a gospel Adventist, I'd love to hear them say, we admit we're not who we originally claimed to be as a church.
Yes.
And I just don't think they can do that, because the gospel Adventist thinks they are in progression from this. They feel like there's a growth happening, and that all the other things like music and dress are just a pendulum swing, like any standards in any movement. I'm suggesting that the gospel Adventist is not progressing on from a core true gospel. From a flawed gospel and progressing onto a true gospel. I'm suggesting that they are a totally different thing, with roots in Adventism, of course. And I think to stay an Adventist, they need to say, look, yeah, okay, we admit we're not now who we originally claimed to be, the Adventist Church. I spoke to someone a while back, maybe a year ago, who isn't in the church anymore officially, but who had a huge amount to do with helping to spread the gospel Adventist kind of teachings. And they said that by watching my programs, interviewing lots of gospel Adventists, they said, I don't think they've even grasped the gospel. I don't think the gospel Adventist has even fully grasped the gospel.
Correct.
So it's easy to go, the traditional Adventists haven't grasped the biblical gospel. They'll hate me for saying that. But this person was suggesting that the gospel Adventist hasn't even fully grasped the gospel message. Have you pondered that yourself? And would you agree with that statement?
I agree 100%. But there's two groups. I see two groups. The first group of gospel Adventists, they are the pastors. They understood the message from their organization is not the gospel. So they try every Sabbath to preach the gospel. And I applaud all the SDA pastors who are trying their best to preach the gospel inside the organization without pushing too much attention, even following the church calendar, which has to have revelation seminars, prayer weeks, mandatory from elders, etc. Pastors receive a lot of pressure from their own members to preach the three angels message. That's true. But there we still have pastors they truly believe they can change the church from inside out, from the pulpit. And I know a lot of them and I applaud them, but I tell this is hard. The second group is the members, the lay members. We have millions of gospel Adventists. They truly believe that, okay, I don't believe in Ellen White anymore. I don't believe in this and this and that, but I'm still a Seventh-day Adventist. That's fair. However, you have to tell yourself, make a question to yourself or to your pastor. It's a simple question. Every time Ellen White said, I saw, the angel showed me, I was taken to heaven, I was in this heavenly places, or we went down in spirit, and the spirit came down to us. Every time she uses the angel said, the angel showed me, every time after that phrase is 100% correct and is 100% biblical? If you answer that question, no, you have a problem.
Mm,
Because she said that came from God. God showed her Jesus, the angel, and what came after is not biblical.
mm,
So just think yourself.
mm,
Because if you go to the text and read her text, starting with that sentence, and the rest is not biblical, you have a problem.
exactly. And therefore, if you are a gospel Adventist, even I believe trying to infuse the gospel into Adventism at a pastoral level or an official capacity, not the grassroots guys, you are walking on kind of troubled ground, because if you bring in that gospel, the gospel of Jesus, into Adventism, but are branded as an Adventist, all of those errors of Ellen White stand on your shoulders and other people see them, whether you're trying to push them or not. By being branded an Adventist apologist,
Mm.
even if you're bringing in, and every single one of your sermons is only based on the gospel of Jesus, even if you're doing that, you're actually, what's the word for it? Validating Ellen White to some degree.
Indirectly, yes. Yes.
Indirectly, yes.
I
Yes.
agree. I agree.
And so even if you're doing the good work, hey, stick around, Rodrigo, Peter, you should have stayed and brought in the gospel. Yeah, but you're still indirectly supporting and validating Ellen G. White. And
Yeah.
those false things, like you said, even one time, if she said it's from God, he showed her, or the messenger, the angel, and it's not, that's a false prophet right there. Bang, one hit.
Correct.
And I think that's in some ways what this person was saying to me, that even they may misunderstand the gospel, but even if they do understand it, by branding themselves as an Adventist apologist, pastor, employee, whatever, they're still indirectly sanctioning Ellen G. White. And if
Yes.
they believe in their heart that Ellen White isn't a prophet, that nothing happened in 1844, and you're a worker getting money from the church, I don't know how you can sleep nights. I can fully understand the grassroots Adventists going, yeah, I don't have to worry about that. I just believe in Jesus. That's all I'm following.
Hmm.
But if you're an
Yeah.
employee and you think nothing happened in 1844, but you're bringing, even if you're bringing in the true gospel, if you're even bringing it in, but you have a sneaking suspicion that she's a false prophet, boy,
Yeah.
yeah, go for it. But I don't know how you sleep at night. I did that. I was that guy. I thought she was a false prophet. I'm still singing, and I thought, well, I'll just bring in the real Jesus. I'll just
Yeah.
bring in Jesus to the church. And even though I don't believe in her, I reckon I did that for a good 20 years. So I'm not judging. I did it. You know,
Yes. I
how did I
understand.
sleep at night? I sleep way better now, I can tell you that.
Yes. I agree.
And
One pastor one day, he called me and he said, "Hey, Rodrigo, I have a trouble. I have some people who don't believe in Ellen White, and they're lead positions in my church." And I said, well, let's talk about it. And I said, I was a 7-day Adventist that time. And he said, I said to him, you have to be transparent. You have to be transparent. Because if you're not transparent now, they're going to figure it out by themselves.
yeah,
And it's going to be a trouble for you. So just do the easy exercise that any Adventist pastor should do. Take Ellen White, take 3 boxes. In one box, you're going to put everything Ellen White says or wrote or in their books, in her books, that It's similar. It follows the Bible. Just put everything inside this box. Say, here you go. This is everything she said. Follows the Bible. It's beautiful. The second box, everything she said that it doesn't follow the Bible. It's wrong. Just put inside the box. And the third box, put all the prophecies that fail. If you can't do this exercise, you can do just reading 3 or 4 books. You don't have even to go to the website. Just take 3 books. You can do this exercise. If you do this as a pastor in front of them, they're going to love you because you're being transparent. And transparency is what the members want. They just want a pastor to be transparent. Just tell me the truth. Just tell me the truth, plain and simple. Because I'm here supporting this community, this church. Just be straight for me, straightforward. You're gonna hurt me maybe for a couple of days, but you're my pastor. Now, how many Adventist pastors can do this? I don't know anyone.
No, if you're employed, you'd never do it. You'd lose your job. And even if you were transparent and said that to the people, like I did, I would say sometimes on the stage, look, I don't believe that in the investigative judgment anymore, but I love Jesus. And because it was in that time period of Jan Paulson, the audience would be, amen, but I wasn't employed by the church. I was like you, a subcontractor to a degree. I was
Right.
invited, but yeah. But even doing that, I had to look back now and say, how did I sleep nights? Because essentially I'm still, no matter how I water Ellen White down, no matter how honest I am about her, by being a Seventh-day Adventist, I'm carrying her flag, even if I don't realize it. I'm validating her, I'm sanctioning her. And so those who don't look deeply into it, go and read The Great Controversy and go, whoa, here we go.
Mm-hmm.
There's some funny conversations going on there. Sherilyn Grovett writes, Angela Lima, I saw a clip where Doug Batchelor said he thought Jesus was SDA. And I've seen that one. And she replies, seriously, Jesus was not a good SDA then. He ate fish.
Yeah.
That Rick wrote a really good comment there. I think it's important for those that want to be Christian. And I know a lot of people watch the program that are former Adventists and are agnostic, atheist, Christian. You're all welcome here at SDAQ&A. But those who want to follow that Christian path and get a clearer understanding of the gospel, you mentioned Galatians before, and Rick writes, it truly is a coming out to set everything aside except for Christ. And the book of Galatians and Romans brought me out of the confusion.
Yes.
And you were saying that Galatians had a huge impact on you. And I think if people read Galatians, Romans, Hebrews, you just don't see Adventism in there.
No.
You see a whole new kind of gospel. And Marie writes, yeah, Rick, it's taken me over a year, but I still have to hear those books again. It's funny here, we're all in audio books now. Those books again and again and again to keep it fresh. I must have been in the twilight zone. I was so out of touch with the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
So it may not take one read. You might have to go back again and again.
Yeah.
James Andres has said, so true, Peter, when you talk face to face to the 19th century pioneer devoted SDA, you realize you are talking to someone from a galaxy far, far away. And I'm sure a lot of gospel Adventists feel that. So they just have to acknowledge what Brian said yesterday. They have to admit we are not who we originally claimed to be. And that, I think, at least gives them some kind of point to move forward from. But they are a different movement. They've grown out of Adventism. They're a hybrid. They're a branch of Adventism at the very best. But they are not a progression from Adventism from there to here. I don't think they even realize they're a whole new highway.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can mention, for example, I know in Brazil, lots of former Adventists, they decided to go to a 7-day Baptist church. They decided to go to this route because they still believe the Sabbath is important for them. Keeping the Sabbath is important, but they understood that, okay, no for salvation, no Sunday law, no, but I still like it. So they've tried to find a different route. The Seventh-day Baptist is one of them in Brazil. They pretty much go to.
Right, interesting. And I've talked a little bit recently. I'm not sure if I've still got it here. Yeah, I'll just quickly bring this up, only in that it's just been fresh in lots of conversations I've had in the last week. This guy, Gilbert Cranmer, he left the SDA Church quite early on in the 1850s, and he started Church of God brackets Seventh Day, and that church still goes to this day, and they're basically Adventists minus Ellen White, and minus some of those cray doctrines.
Yep.
So that's something. It's an interesting movement that people might want to explore, because Seventh-day Baptists have really no connection to Adventists, but Church of God brackets Seventh Day, they do. They have,
Yeah.
he's like an Adventist minus Ellen White and the cray doctrines. They love the Sabbath. They have, they still go. I'm going to be getting on the program one of the Sydney Church of God. They call themselves COG7, COG7, for
COG7.
Church of God Seventh Day.
Interesting.
This is just an indication of the extra biblical kind of work that Ellen does, and so do her followers. Cindy Lou writes, did you see Mark Finlay's presentation of In His Imagination, he saw Satan and his angels scattered over other planets in the universe, plotting against earthlings. And so they take that liberal, they feel that they're at liberty to do that because Ellen White did that. She had the prequel to the Bible with the whole, what went on in heaven before the fall of Satan. She then has the Bible, which she colors with all her stories and expands upon, in Desire of Ages. She's got one whole chapter dedicated to Judas and what happened. And, it's all just artistic license. And then she adds the post, the next show after the Bible with what happens next. And it's all, what were your thoughts when you left the church, and you started exploring Galatians minus all the extra paintwork? What did you think? Were you shocked? Were you like, hang on a second, these other things are in my head still, but they didn't happen?
Yeah. I found myself cleaning, I think is the best word, cleaning my mind in a process. At the same time I was putting information in, was cleaning one side and putting information in. For example, lots of things that Ellen White said about, for example, the history of redemption, the beginning of the conflict in heaven. Then I learned for the first time that Ellen White wrote that Jesus cried with Satan because Satan was out of heaven and asking for a interview, a meeting with God, and then
He sought forgiveness.
they were forgiven. And for the first time, I was reading the book and saying how she was able to even portray the scene of Jesus suffering with Satan together side by side. That was too much. I was just speechless.
That finding that out was in 1987, maybe, was my first. Hang on a second. This is just so not in the Bible. It's beyond artistic license. It's creating a narrative that's fiction and presenting it as truth.
Yeah.
It's an incredible, it's like a trilogy of the prequel, the Bible stories, and the whatever comes next. What do you call that? The next movie. It's just astounding at the artistic license that she took to present as truth.
Peter, I always thought Daniel was a vegetarian.
Yes.
I always thought Daniel and Shadrach and Meshach was always vegetarian. I never thought for one second, wait, they're Jewish. And Jewish, they eat meat.
Yeah.
and they have meat in their celebrations. So,
Yeah.
what is
I
going
know.
on?
I know. What a manipulation.
So the simple things, they are not hard to understand. They are very
No.
basic. Like Satan asking forgiveness for Jesus before the creation. Daniel is a vegetarian. Small things that
Yeah.
they stuck in your mind so strongly that you kind of that's it. Yeah, Daniel was a vegetarian.
Yeah. Incredible. Like I would challenge Adventists to ever be able to disentangle themselves, even if they've left, to fully see the Bible story, the complete narrative accurately, because of the incredible amount of pre-Bible, Bible adjustments, what's going to happen afterwards, what's about to happen next. It just permeates every part of your thinking. If you're a um, generational Adventist, I mean, even in my head, I think, yeah, Daniel was a vegetarian. No matter how many times you tell me that, he was a vegetarian. Um, I just can't escape it.
Yeah.
Um, we'll close on your thoughts on this. George Tichy has said Adventism cannot and will not change about Ellen G. White. Those that have given up Ellen White, I'm assuming he's saying, need to leave.
Mhm.
Um, do you find yourself encouraging people to leave, or what's your stance on that? Or do you see yourself a little bit like me, where you're just at least presenting information people to decide for themselves?
Uh, I never expected to have so many people talking to me and expressing their realities. They are way more complicated than mine. We I have the opportunity weekly to talk with entire families when the husband is in the 7 Day Adventist, is elderly, and the wife and the kids don't want to go anymore. I talk with a lot of people. They are struggling to leave because they fear if they leave they're going to lose salvation.
Yes.
So I
That
have
identity thing again with Adventism.
exactly.
So strong.
They believe the other churches are Babylon. So there's if they leave 7 Day Adventist, there's no way to go. There's no other option because all the others are wrong and they're Babylon. I stopped saying people to leave SDA right from the spot because I don't believe humans can convince anyone to leave a church. I think this is a work through the gospel, through the word, and through Jesus. If God wants any person to leave the SD organization, there will be a time for that.
Right.
So I believe my job now, my work now, is to ask people to think by themselves.
Yeah.
And one of the things I learned about watching a documentary from there's a documentary from the Heaven's Gate documentary, the cult from California.
Yes.
Is on HBO, and there's one psychologist in that documentary. He mentioned something that I never forget, and is exactly what has happened. Yes, the organization for with me for so many years. He said that for me as psychiatrist, psychologist, the hard thing to do is make people think by themselves.
Yeah.
Because if they don't have the ability to see the world, to see life without any goggles from any organization, they are
Yeah.
not going to make it. And he helped a person for many years who left the Heaven's Gate, and after so much work, after a couple consultations, he left and he killed himself.
Yeah.
So many years helping someone to think by themselves, but after a couple years disconnected from the support, he gave up on his life because he believed he if you do that he will met all the group in the planet or in the comet, whatever place they were planning to get together.
Yeah.
So I don't push people to, hey, you have to leave the SD. No, no, no. We are not against Adventists. We are learning against Adventism,
Yeah.
which is a completely different thing. And people can leave now because of family things, because of the job, because they're pastors, because they're people related to the publishing house, to the schools, to the universities. They cannot leave the church or they're going to break even more their situation. So I understand that, and God has a plan for each one.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, it's been so good having you on the program, Rodrigo. We've talked about it for a long time, and it's finally happened. It was
Yeah,
great to meet you face to face in Loma Linda. What's that valley called? The San Bernardino.
yeah,
I
San Bernardino, and
think that's right.
the
Um,
region over there.
I literally had Mexican food for every meal. At the fellowship, they had the Mexican breakfast with eggs and burritos and stuff.
Yeah,
James and I, and even Steve Daly, and I, you, me, Test the Prophet. Whenever we went out, it was always these great Mexican
Mexican food.
restaurants, and,
Yeah,
I've heard that particular valley is known for having the best kind of Mexican food outside of Mexico.
yeah.
My daughter last night, she's 11, and they had a big school kind of fete or fair, and the kids in 3 grade 6 classes had to present food and information about a different part of the world, and hers
Mhm.
was Mexican, and so they had Mexican food there. So I was in heaven again. So I hope we get to break tacos again together at some point in the future, and
Yes.
I look forward to having you on the program again. And I really wish you well in your endeavors and your channel. I'm just going to bring it up one more time on the screen. So, Pete, because it's, I took a while learning how to pronounce it, the Paraki Posamos.
Perfect. Yeah,
And
you're great. You're
I'm
doing
getting
great.
there. I'm getting there. And I really encourage people. Would you prefer people to go and find you on Facebook, or would you prefer them to go to the YouTube channel?
I believe YouTube is the best place because of the technology. You can kind of put the captions on and learn about it. We have short videos, long videos. We have long documentaries like 1 hour, 1 hour and
Mm,
20 minutes about all different subjects. And I appreciate all the support you guys have been giving
yeah,
to us. Thank you for the invitation, Peter.
my
Was a great
pleasure.
time in Loma Linda, and your channel. It is part of my journey, and
Wow.
all the content you produce. I know that it makes the difference in so many lives, and did in my life as well.
Oh, thank you so much. That warms my heart, and I look forward to chatting more and collaborating, hopefully in the future as well. I think it'd be fantastic. We'll get George to do the voiceovers, and Angela Lima to do the voiceovers. Uh,
Yep.
Maybe and next time we can do an interview, we can speak in real time, and they can be doing a voiceover at the same time. I get too confusing.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's
But
do it.
all the best, mate. Great to catch up. And everyone, thanks for watching. Send up those love hearts and likes for Rodrigo. Go and support his work. Go immediately. Check out either of those channels, Facebook and YouTube, and support what he's doing. And yeah, we'll look forward to seeing you all again next week. See you later.